IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Wednesday, everybody, and we have a loaded show coming your way today. There's a bunch of different topics that we're going to cover. And look, fact of the matter is, if you have a phone or a TV or a laptop, or if you woke up this morning, I'm sure that you've seen and or heard that people are pretty upset. And there are some fan bases and some talking heads and some national media pundits that are beside themselves at what Notre Dame's ranking is in the latest CFP ranking. And so Brian's been doing his due diligence on Twitter and providing people with facts and countering a lot of the very lazy narratives. And so what we're going to do in part one of today's show is we are simply going to address some of the things that may or may not be out there. We're going to debunk a lot of things that we've been hearing a lot, and we're going to be using a lot of the different metrics that we know that the committee uses, and some of the metrics that some of the anti-Notre Dame people also use. And to their dismay, it proves the point of Notre Dame being ranked ahead correct. And then it is Wednesday, so we are also going to be talking about Notre Dame's keys to victory, because they do still have a matchup this Saturday against Syracuse Orange for Senior Day. But Brian, man, it's been a crazy last 15 hours.
Been kind of fun. And I can't say that I'm surprised that we're seeing the hand wringing that we're seeing because of who Notre Dame is ranked ahead of. You know, you can't fool with Bama. You gotta pretend like this is still Nick Saban's Alabama. Somebody I saw on Twitter said, if Nick Saban was still the coach, Alabama wouldn't be 9. And I'm like, yeah, because they wouldn't have 2 losses, because they wouldn't have lost to Florida State and probably wouldn't have lost to Oklahoma if Nick Saban was the coach. So, yeah, there's just been a lot of it's kind of hilarious. I mean, you see some of the people are good, people. They just, I think, have bought into lazy narratives. Other people, it's their emotional, like the college football nerds are losing their minds today. I really like those guys. And if you don't watch their show, I'd encourage you to watch their show, but you just have to understand some of the built-in biases that they have. And I think they try to hide those biases, but there comes a point in time when you can. And I mean, we all fall victim to that at some point in time. And then there's other people that are just absolute hacks that are basically trying to rage bait people. And so they make these comments. So like Dan Walken, who is one of the worst, quote unquote, journalists out there that cover college sports, making his claim and major props, because I'm fighting my fight, but major props to some other Notre Dame fans. Let me find the Twitter account that called him out on this, because this was absolutely phenomenal. Or basically the argument he's making now for why Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame is the argument he made in 2018 for why Michigan should have been ahead of Notre Dame with a worse record and a head-to-head loss. It's from End Zone Leprechaun. So shout out to End Zone Leprechaun for making that argument. But basically, it's like some of people are just doing this for clicks. But other people, I do think genuinely, I don't think the college football nerds are disagreeing with the ranking because they want clicks. I think they genuinely believe that. I think some other writers genuinely believe what they believe. The problem is they don't understand what goes into the ranking, because if all you're doing is watching ESPN and reading ESPN, then what I found out is you have no understanding whatsoever of what goes into the rankings. I have read 50 articles over the years from ESPN about trying to understand what goes into their rankings. And so that's why we've kind of had to rely on Heather Dinich a little bit. John Bryce, in one article, wrote out everything that the committee looks at. And when you look at that data, you have to look at it, because the reality is there are 3 levels to what the committee looks at. And then there's different data points within each level. And the first level is just your resume, like just your surface level resume. Who have you played and who did you beat? And that's part of it. The second level is the data, right? It's how you played in those games. What does the data say about how you performed in those games beyond just the score? And then the third level is eye test. Alabama has the advantage over Notre Dame in sort of the surface level aspects of it. 8-2, more ranked wins, 1 more quality win than Notre Dame. Miami has an advantage in that they have the head-to-head over Notre Dame. Now, Miami is 1-0 against ranked teams, that being Notre Dame. They have 2 wins over quality opponents, which is basically anyone with over a 500 record. That's it. Miami has 6 wins over teams that have a sub 500 or a 500 record. Notre Dame has 4. And then Oklahoma's 3-2 against top 25 teams, but only has 3 wins over teams with a resume greater. So, and we'll bring up this data so you guys can see it all. The second part is the data part, which comes from how you played. It dives into more than just, okay, here's what the score was, but what was the level of dominance you showed in that game? And that comes into game control, relative statistics, points per play, and all that type of stuff. Notre Dame dominates Miami in that area. They dominate Oklahoma in that area, and then they have an advantage over Alabama in certain areas and a giant advantage over Alabama in other areas. And so that's plus Notre Dame. And then the third part is eye test. And no one with a brain can watch these teams over the last 10 weeks and say that Alabama looks better on film than Notre Dame does, unless you just have pure, unadulterated SEC bias, or maybe you've watched Notre Dame once, but you watch Alabama every week, and you're just going to come to this conclusion. And the thing that I have to ask all of you that are making these complaints and just the incessant whining about where Alabama is ranked, just for 1 minute, give me a little bit of intellectual curiosity. Just for 1 minute. Think about this and then do 5 minutes of research. So I'm only asking for 6 minutes of your time if you're someone who thinks that Notre Dame should be behind Alabama. Number one, take 1 minute to ask yourself this question. Why did the AP, the coaches, the College Football Playoff Committee, and every single computer model, why do all of them rank Notre Dame ahead of Alabama and Miami? Just ask yourself that question for 1 second. Well, it's bias. Okay. You could say that about the human people. Let's just say I granted that premise. Then why does every computer model have Notre Dame ahead of them? The Football Power Index, which has never been pro Notre Dame. The SP Plus, which is always pro SEC bias. The Sagarin, the FEI, all of them have Notre Dame ahead. And so we're going to break down that data and dive into it and make our case for why Notre Dame should be ahead. So we just kind of set the tone for it. And now we're going to dive into the arguments, Trevor, and lay out the argument that shows you why Notre Dame is ahead of Oklahoma or Alabama and Miami, and why, using that same data, you could make a strong case that Notre Dame should also be ahead of Oklahoma. And I would encourage you all to look at the data because it will change your mind, just like it did mine. As I mentioned last night, Trevor, when we first did our first playoff rankings, what's the one team that I was adamant should not be ahead of Notre Dame? Oregon. Bingo. Why am I not arguing for that now? Because they beat a solid Iowa team on the road by a walk-off field goal? No. Because the data that I finally got my hands on and looked at is what the committee's looking at tells me a very clear story. Oregon's resume on levels 2, the number 3 is arguable. That's more subjective. But Notre Dame has the better, resume in regards to wins and top 25s and quality wins and all that. But Oregon absolutely controls part 2. And then on part 1, you could also make the case that Oregon is 9-1 and Notre Dame is 8-2. I don't buy that so much because Oregon hasn't really played anybody, but how they played is certainly factored into that. And so I'm not making that argument anymore. So we're going to have some fun here pointing this out and showing, just using data, not emotion, not feelings, not SEC is king. So like, well, yeah, Notre Dame was looking like I made this case to college football nerds. Again, good guys. Don't go at them, unless you're going to have a fair debate with them. But, well, yeah, you think Notre Dame is looking better because they've been beating teams like Navy and Pitt. I'm like, this is exactly why people think that you are biased towards the SEC and you're homer towards the SEC. Why are you assuming that Pitt's this way worse team than what Missouri is or Tennessee is? Why are you assuming that? I don't think you should be assuming that. The committee doesn't assume that. Why are you assuming that Tennessee is way better than Navy? Are they better than Navy as far as the Pitt? Why are you assuming that Missouri is way better than Navy? Well, they're ranked higher. Yeah, but the committee looks at like 30 teams. I promise you that Navy and Pitt are in that 30 group that they're looking at because those teams have been ranked by this committee. And Tennessee outgained Alabama. Missouri and Alabama had the same amount of yards in a 3-point win, whereas Notre Dame played those teams and absolutely dominated those teams. And those things factor in. But it's like, well, but that's the bias that goes into this. Well, because Missouri and Tennessee are SEC teams, the assumption is, well, they're clearly better than Navy. and they're clearly better than Pitt. And it really doesn't matter what data you bring to them. They're just not going to accept that reality. They're going to continue to spin it away as, oh, well, this team's not good and that team is good and this and that and the other thing. And I want to just remind you that the last time Pitt played Tennessee, it was Tennessee won by a touchdown in overtime. I just want to remind people of that. So it's not like these two teams haven't played. And the year before that, in 2021, Pitt beat Tennessee. So, well, Navy sucks. Well, I mean, they beat Oklahoma. Oh, it's a bowl game. Doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. There's always some justification for why the SEC teams lose and why the SEC is so much better. And the SEC is the best conference from a depth standpoint. We've argued that. But what you have to learn is that the wins that Bama has is why they're 10th and not lower. Because there's a lot about this Alabama team that says this is not a very good football team. But they are winning games, and those games matter, which is why they're 10th. Just like if it wasn't for the Notre Dame head-to-head, Miami wouldn't even be in the top 15. They'd maybe be outside the top 25 because they've beaten no one and lost to two, not ranked opponents. So that's what the argument we're going to make, Trevor, in this show, and I'm very much looking forward to it. But yeah, it's not been surprising, but it doesn't make it any less annoying, to be honest with you.
No, you and I were talking before the show. I'm not surprised at all. It's no surprise to me that the same two teams last year, whining and complaining, two teams who didn't handle business against teams that they should have beaten, are trying to find and hang on to any sort of thing that should propel them into the playoffs. It was Alabama and Miami last year. And it's Alabama and Miami again this year. And it's very, very similar. Last year, Miami was like, well, look what we did to Florida in the swamp. It's like, yeah, and then you blew your season away at the end of the year.
Right.
With Alabama, it was, guys, we still beat Georgia. Look we beat Georgia. And it's like, yeah, and then you lost to a team with a losing record. Like, it's frustrating. It's not surprising. After we dive into some of these numbers, Brian, that you have, I'm excited because I have my feelings on it too. Definitely in line with what you have, but mine is to even counter the other lazy surface level arguments with surface level stuff that you could just go find if you, like you said, did a little bit of research. But I'm excited to dive into some of these numbers with you, man. This is going to be good.
So the format of what we're going to do, and we got some super chats in there. We appreciate y'all. We'll definitely get to those. But and then after we do this, we are going to do our keys to victory breakdown and have some fun with that. But we're going to basically take it kind of surface level data, and then we'll talk eye test and make our case for why if you get beyond your feelings and emotions of Bama, head to head matters. It does. But sometimes you have to ask yourself, is head to head the reason this is even close? Is head to head the reason that Miami's even where they are? Because if you take the head to head out, it's not even close. And that's where you see a lot of lazy arguments. I saw a Texas writer say, well, there's no incentive for Texas to play Ohio State. Because if they don't lose that game, I'm like, no, if you lose that game, you're probably ranked exactly where you are, if not lower. Because if you lose that game, what's your resume built on? You beat Oklahoma, and then you lost to a 3-7 Florida team. Like you're not that great of a team. Your resume's not that strong. You'd probably be about right where you are now. If you actually understand kind of who this team is. So, when you see those arguments from people that cover Texas and you're like, hey, here's a thought. Don't get dominated by Georgia. Don't lose by 25 points at Georgia. Don't get beat by a 3-7 Florida team in a game where you literally got whooped. You never led. The only tie in the game was nothing. That's the only time the game was tied. We're going to dive into all that stuff. So, and if your answer is like, hey, just win or whatever, guys, just please don't do that. Please don't be that person today. We're having a very specific argument. Obviously, if Notre Dame wins out, they're going to have a shot to be in. But when you just say just win out, you also show a lack of understanding for how the committee works, because you can't just win out. Because if Notre Dame just goes and beats Syracuse by a touchdown and beats Stanford by a touchdown, the data will change, and Notre Dame may not be where they are now. So it's not as simple as just win out, because that's the same kind of surface level analysis that gets us to where we are now of people making the arguments that they're making. It's not that simple. You have to win out and look good doing so. Go ahead, Trev.
No, agreed with what you're saying. I think that comment in the chat was about my comment about Alabama losing in November, like similarities from last year to this year. I think it was that, not Notre Dame. I could be wrong, but I think that was more centric to Miami and Bama.
Fair. And if that's true, then that's absolutely true. But there is plenty of that still. Yep. We've seen it, and so we'll dive into it. So, Trev, let's get into the numbers here real quick, and have some fun with this conversation. And so. Let's begin. We're going to take this. We're going to do the sort of the surface level aspect of the resume, which is important. When I say surface level, I'm not dismissing the importance of the surface level. That's clearly a key component of the rankings. What I'm saying is, if that's all you're looking at, then you're missing the boat. That's the point. Is there's a lot more to this conversation than just that. And if you get off your SEC homer stuff, which so many in the media have right now, you'll understand that. It has to go beyond the surface level. So let's just look at some of the surface level stuff, Trevor. I'm throwing Oklahoma in here to make the point that you could absolutely argue that Notre Dame should not only be ahead of Bama and Miami, but should also be ahead of Oklahoma. So let's look at resumes. 8-2 record, all the same. So that's a wash. Top 25 wins. Notre Dame is, I would argue, fourth among these four teams when it comes to their top 25 resume. Is that fair to say, Trev? I mean, Miami's 1-0. Now, they're not, Notre Dame's got 2 losses, but Miami's best win, Miami's one top 25 win is better than Notre Dame's one top 25 win because Notre Dame is ranked out of USC. Fair? And obviously Notre Dame has 2 losses. Notre Dame, without question, has the best losses on this docket. Oklahoma is second, and I would argue a very close second when it comes to their losses because they lost to number 6 and number 17. Notre Dame lost to number 3 and number 13. So they're second. And then obviously Bama is 1 and Oklahoma is 2 when it comes to wins. So Bama certainly gets the nod on this aspect of it because they do have 4 wins over top 25 teams. They have 5 wins over quality opponents, which is basically a record of over 500. Notre Dame is number 2 behind Alabama in this metric and just 1 spot behind Alabama. And the thing is, this could change. If Navy and Pittsburgh, well, Navy doesn't play this weekend, but if Pittsburgh goes on the road and beats Georgia Tech this week, and then guess what? Boom, that's another top 25 win. That's kind of how the process works. If Navy wins against Memphis next weekend, there's a pretty good chance that they're jumping in, and all of a sudden Notre Dame's 3-2. If Missouri loses to Oklahoma this weekend, then all of a sudden that win over Missouri doesn't look as good. That win over Missouri doesn't look as good. They drop out. And so that stuff fluctuates, but you have to get over the top 25 wins when one of your wins is 20 and one of your wins is number 23. When the reality is Notre Dame has 2 wins of let's just say 28 and 29 or 26 and 29. And it's about how they won, which we'll get to. But so just the polls. Now, these polls don't go into the committee. It's just kind of showing an example of that. But then let's go down to strength of schedule, strength of record, and game control. So shout out to Adam McClintock let me see where Adam is. Adam McClintock is, he writes for, let me find Adam's Twitter page here real quick. So Adam writes for Matrix Analytics. He's the co-founder of Matrix Analytics. And I was chatting with him a little bit earlier today because he has a strength of schedule metric that is different than what you see on ESPN. Because ESPN has the number like Alabama, like 4th and Notre Dame 29th and different things like that. And I'm like, I know that that's not what the committee uses. So I asked him, what's your formula? And what he said is the committee released a formula on strength of schedule that has not really changed since 2014. And he uses their formula to calculate strength of schedule. Well, when you look at that regard, Alabama has a better strength of schedule than Notre Dame, but not by a lot. It's not the 10-4. What is it? I think on ESPN, Trevor, aren't they like 4th in strength of schedule, I believe, on ESPN's strength of schedule metric, because they have their own formula, which, as you and I have talked about a million times, is always very pro SEC as far as how that's ranked. So if you look at the resume, they have Alabama's strength of schedule at 4. Notre Dame at 29. Well, when you look at the one that the committee uses, Notre Dame's 33, which is lower than that than the one on ESPN, but Alabama's 21. This is where you see why Oklahoma is one spot ahead of Notre Dame, in my opinion. Is that right there? Alabama and Notre Dame are in sort of the similar ballpark when it comes to strength of schedule. Notre Dame and Oklahoma are not. Oklahoma's got the 10th best strength of schedule, whereas Notre Dame's 33. Strength of record, all similar. Notre Dame is just behind Alabama and Oklahoma. They are ahead of Miami. And then there's game control, which factors in your dominance within each game. Notre Dame is 5, Alabama's 10, Miami's 9, Oklahoma's 7. So Oklahoma's closer to Notre Dame than is Miami or Alabama. That has more to do with how you play. So as you can see, in some of these areas, Alabama has an edge. In some of these areas, Notre Dame has an edge. More areas where Alabama has an edge. Would you say that that's fair?
Yeah.
I would say that there's really no areas, even in this level. Right now, the only thing Miami has is head-to-head over Notre Dame. That's it.
Yep.
They're not really close to Notre Dame in any other area. And that's what Miami people are missing here. But so this is the top-level data. This is the surface-level data that people are using and people are losing their minds about. And it does show that Alabama has an edge. And if that's all the committee was looking at, then you might have more of a beef. But it just continues to show a fundamental lack of understanding of what the committee looks at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing that people have failed to understand, and really since the college football playoffs have started, and not just the 12 team, this goes back to the 14 playoff as well, that there are so many different metrics and they don't have like a trump card. Like head to head is not the trump card. It's like, oh, well, Notre Dame ranks higher in this, and this, but the head to head, that's not how it works. And I know we're about to get a little bit more granular with some of the things that do strongly favor Notre Dame in a lot of these topics. But it's not just head-to-head. It's not just who you beat. It's everything all mixed together. Think of it like cooking. Like if I'm making a pizza, I don't just need the dough. It's a big part. But you also need all the sides and everything else that comes with it. And you need all of it equally for it to be a pizza. Like it's not just the cheese. It's not just the pepperoni. That's how I look at the playoff rankings. It's not just one thing. But what people fail to grasp is that they want it to just be the one thing because that's the easiest to follow.
The problem with your analogy, Trevor, is now I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And now I'm in the mood for pizza. So, other than that, it's a great analogy. But here's the other part that doesn't get shown here, which people have to say why Alabama's surface level resume over Notre Dame isn't as strong as people think it is. Yes, you have the 4 wins over top 25 teams and then the 1 loss to a top 25 team. And it's a good loss. And your best loss is not as good as Notre Dame's best loss. Is that fair to say? Notre Dame's best loss is to the number 3 team. Alabama's is to the number 8 team. Notre Dame had a 10-point lead at multiple times in that game, lost the game at the end. And at the end of the day, all that matters is that you win or lose the game. And Alabama was trailing Oklahoma for much of that game. Alabama did take a lead at one point in time late in the game and then lost that lead. So, Alabama. So let's see here. Alabama took a lead in the third quarter, took a 21-20 lead. Oklahoma took that back with 13 minutes left. And in 13 minutes and 40-some seconds, Alabama could not muster even a field goal in that game. So Alabama has the better wins. Notre Dame has the better losses by a mile because Alabama, again, lost to a ACC team that's currently 5-5 in a game where they got dominated from start to finish. They took a 7-0 lead, and then Florida State scored 24 consecutive points. Alabama came to get it within a touchdown, and Florida State immediately responded by going down and scoring a touchdown. That doesn't tell you that losses matter more than wins. Grow up, because this is why you continue to make this mistake and say these silly things like losses matter more than wins, because you're only looking at the surface level. But you can't deny that bad loss for Alabama does make it closer, even though you and I will grant that just looking at this data, Alabama has a slight edge over Notre Dame. Would you agree with that, Trevor?
Yeah.
Okay. I would also agree that Oklahoma has an edge over Notre Dame. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Miami still doesn't have an argument over Notre Dame. They literally, all other than head-to-head, head-to-head's got to matter. It does matter. But you don't have an advantage over Notre Dame in almost any other area, which will show. And Miami has 2 of the 3 worst losses on this. Would you agree with that also? Florida State's one of those.
Yep.
But they have the 2 of the 3 worst losses. I would argue that that Alabama has the worst loss, and then the next 2 worst losses are Miami's. So you don't really have as much of a beef here as you think. So that's part 1, Trev. Let's go to part 2. This is now the data. And what do we mean by data? It's not points per game and all these things that are not relative to how you play each other. It's looking at the data from a standpoint of how the committee evaluates it, which are different metrics that show how you perform relative to the teams that you're playing. It's about how you play. The games don't matter. Yes, the games matter. You're the ones cheapening the games. You're the ones that are just looking at the score and who you played and saying that's all that should matter and not actually diving into the games. It's ironic how SEC people want to always diminish when the SEC loses by making some excuse. Well, they only lost this way. They only lost that way. But when those same things can be applied to their wins, they don't want to take away credit. They just want to say, no. Winning and losing is all that matters. So let's dive into the data. So John Bryce's article, which was phenomenal, by the way, that he wrote a couple weeks ago, and I can't believe I didn't see it until this week, basically looks at like the 12 different criteria that the committee looks at. And we're gonna bring some of those up: game control, strength of schedule, different things like that. But the numbers at the top are the computer models that I've seen. And I actually have added one of them in there, not as part of this model because I refuse to actually use that as an actual argument. But that's S&P Plus. I have put that in there before. I'm not going to put that in. I've talked about them before. I'm not going to put them in here because I think they're very pro SEC in their metrics. But I find it ironic that even the S&P Plus, SP Plus, which is very pro SEC in most years, has Notre Dame 5, Miami 10, Alabama 11, and Oklahoma 12. That's their predictive model. SP Plus is predictive, is what they say. But in every metric except for one, Notre Dame is higher than Bama, Miami, or Oklahoma. Massey rating is the only one that has Alabama ahead of Notre Dame. And that's by 2. They're way ahead of Miami. They're way ahead of Oklahoma and all of those. But where does this data come from? All right, so this is exactly what we look at. This relative scoring offense, relative total offense, points per play on offense, and points per yard on offense. This is the data that the committee uses to evaluate how good is a football team. How do they perform? How do they dominate their opponents? And then you look at same thing for defense, relative scoring defense, relative total defense, relative points per play, and then relative yards points per yard. As you can see in this metric, Notre Dame is ahead of Alabama in every aspect on offense and dominates them in 2 of those 3. Notre Dame and Miami aren't even in the same conversation. You want to know why the committee doesn't evaluate Notre Dame and Miami? It's this right here. So you look down at the defense. Miami's ahead of Notre Dame on defense, but barely. But Notre Dame is way ahead of Miami on offense. So it's not really close. Oklahoma also is ahead of Notre Dame on offense. But this is the argument that I would say you could use this data to show that Notre Dame has been a far more dominant team than Oklahoma. And so Notre Dame can match these teams on defense, but they have clearly the best offense on here. I just want to remind some Notre Dame fans who continue to complain about the Notre Dame offense, look at this data right here. So when you look at these numbers, these are the numbers that go into saying beyond just who did you play and your opinion, your feelings, and then you start looking at the relative data. Here's the interesting thing. The relative scoring on offense and defense and relative yards, I got that from CFB Nerds. It's on their website. And so basically what it does is it takes into account sort of like who you play. And I'll try to find sort of like an explanation of this. It measures an offense's performance by comparing its points scored against its opponent's average scoring defense. So basically, like, how do you beat a team compared to everyone else that kind of plays those teams? And that's how they come to this metric. So, and this is something that the guys at CFB, College Football Nerds, have been using for years to do their models. And by the way, I did go and look. Notre Dame would be favored to beat all 16 SEC teams and Miami, according to the College Football Nerds model. I just want to point that out. But when you look at this data, Trev, compared to Alabama, of these 8 categories, Notre Dame has the advantage in 7 of them. Alabama has an advantage in 1, relative total defense. That's yards. And Alabama's 1 spot ahead of Notre Dame in that metric. So again, you look at the data shows that Notre Dame is not just better than Alabama, but significantly so, because while the defenses are comparable, Notre Dame is still better on defense. There is no comparison between the 2 offenses. None. And that's kind of, that's a big data point that I think shows you why. You want to know why Notre Dame's ranked ahead of Alabama? And bam, right here. Thoughts, Trev?
No, I'm with this completely. And I have, I have some stats that I'll rattle off here in a little bit that back up what this is real time and what it's been like in a certain sample size over. But look, these are the metrics that, one, it's tough for people to listen to because, one, shout out to John Bryce for the article of releasing this out, but they would just listen to ESPN and listen to the commissioner and the committee talk about these rankings and say, yes, the strength of schedule head to head, but the other metrics, quote, like the other metrics that they use is what puts Notre Dame in this. These are the other metrics. Relative scoring offense, relative scoring defense, all of those are the other metrics, and it favors Notre Dame. Plain and simple. It's unfortunate. I wish the committee would put these out and not just rely on like an interview with the commissioner afterwards. You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right, Trevor, because that interview, it does nothing. People looking for validation and looking for surface level arguments, you're feeding them red meat. With some of these, like, some of these explanations that he talked about Alabama's rushing offense. You're telling me because Alabama can't run the ball? No, I'm telling you because Alabama can't run the football, they're not a great football team. And the data shows that. I'm with you. I wish they would release this data. The problem is then people would grab onto the data and ignore the other aspects to it.
Sure.
And that's why I wish there was a little bit more better answers in some of these areas. Some of his answers were good. Some of his answers that people are losing their minds about, it's like, okay, yeah, that wasn't a great answer, but you're missing parts of what he said that absolutely back up what he's talking about. And that has to factor in at some point in time. I mean, like the Penn State argument. Well, Penn State kind of lost their way after the Oregon game. I mean, that is a relative argument. Sometimes a team is good. That's a very talented Penn State team. They went on the road and beat them on the road in a ranked win. And Penn State kind of lost their way after that. They didn't recover from that well. I don't think it's a great argument, but I think you have to be able to look and say, hey, this team is different. And I think you have to, like with Oklahoma, that's why I'm willing to give Oklahoma a little bit more grace than maybe I would Alabama, because even though Notre Dame's numbers are way better, you can look at Oklahoma and say, yeah, but they also lost their 2 games while their quarterback was struggling to get back to good health. I still think Notre Dame's a better team, but I'm willing to say you have to have some level of accepting context on why certain games matter. I'm not someone who believes in, well, that game happened in week 1 and week 3. That's bullcrap. Those games count. That's why Notre Dame is 9. If we were going to not count games 1 and 2, then I'd be arguing Notre Dame should be like 3rd or 4th in the rankings. But you can't, because like, here's the thing about Notre Dame fans. You've never heard me once say Notre Dame should be 4th. You've never heard me once say they should be 5th. You never heard me once say they should be 6th, which is what they are in the Sagarin FPI and the FEI. You've never heard me say they should be 5th, which is what they are in the SP+. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that because that's what the data shows, and you can't ignore those first 2 games. And so the other part is this is where you see simple people with simple minds. There's someone in the chat that says, using statistical data to determine who is better when it was settled in the field is beyond illogical. No, this says more about your lack of understanding this, because it's not settled on the field, because they don't all play the same exact 10 teams. Miami beating Notre Dame is part of the data. It's the only reason Miami is close. What the statistics show is how you performed on the field. That's what stats come from. It comes from your on-the-field performance. It was settled on the field. Notre Dame has been a better team than Alabama or Miami for the course of the entire season based on what happened on the field. What happened on the field is Miami beat Notre Dame. Correct, Trev? We all agree that game happened?
Last
You
I
know what
checked,
else happened on the field? Miami lost to 2 unranked football teams. That
Yes.
also happened on the field.
Look, I can sympathize with people's arguments strictly being look at the entirety of the season, head-to-head, yada, 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 all that. I agree completely. And it should be an evaluation of the entire season. You would also be lying to yourself if you said that that Notre Dame team that played down in Hard Rock Stadium on August 31st is the same Notre Dame team on November 19th. You would just be lying to yourself. And that's the same with every team. Every team. Ohio State is not the same team that beat Texas by 7 points as it was on August 30th as it was now. That's the evolution of the team. So the challenge of the committee is you have to weigh the entire season from a resume standpoint, but you have to also evaluate how they've been recently, because how they've played recently is more indicative of who they're going to be in the playoffs and what they were in August. That's just how it works.
That leads us into point 3, Trevor, because what you're talking about now is the third part of what the committee looks at, which is eye test. Now, eye test is about data also, but it's about looking at stats. And you can say, hey, look, I know that Alabama beat Tennessee 37-20, but I watched that game, and Tennessee's bad. Like, Tennessee's not that good, which is why they rank where they rank. And that wasn't as impressive of a win from watching it as when I watched Notre Dame, what I watched Notre Dame do to Pitt. And there's not a huge gap between Pitt and Miami based on what the committee views. I watched Alabama beat Georgia. That's a great win. Guys, that's the only reason they're 10th. If you take that game away, and let's say they lose to Georgia, but beat Florida State, guess what? They're still kind of exactly where they are. Because if you look at how the games are played over the course of a season, if your argument is narrowed down into one game or two games, you're missing the point. And I'm not someone who says, well, that game's different and that game doesn't count. That should not be the case. But you also can't ignore the fact of how teams have evolved over the course of the season. And that's always been true. Always been true. Alabama, over the course of the season, has had some very good wins. Their defense has gotten better. Part of the loss to Florida State, in my opinion, was not really knowing what Florida State was going to do schematically because they had a new coordinator, and you were missing some good players on defense. But there were also some things in that game that show that some fundamental flaws in Florida State that have kind of preceded them, followed them the entire season, which is the fact that they can't run the football. They don't try to run the football, which is why they didn't blow out Oklahoma. Put Oklahoma away. It's why they didn't and couldn't put LSU away. It's why they couldn't put South Carolina away, why they fell behind South Carolina. It's why they couldn't put Missouri away. They've played a lot of very close games. Yes, they win, but they had a 3-point win over a 3-loss Missouri team that has not beaten a ranked team all year. They had a 3-point win over a Georgia team, which is a great win, right? But their win was over Vanderbilt, not overly impressive when you watch the game. They pulled away late. The Tennessee win, it was a good win. But did you watch the game? That's not a top 5 team if I'm watching that team play. That's recently. Did you watch them play LSU? Say, well, what about Notre Dame against Boston College? Fair counter. But here's the difference. That was an anomaly for Notre Dame. Alabama does that constantly. Constantly. And that's the difference. And so when you look at the eye test, this is another one to me where Notre Dame has a clear advantage. And the only way you can argue otherwise is if you're just going to use the SEC homerism, which is, they were beating Navy, USC, and Pitt, while Alabama had to beat insert average, mediocre, overranked SEC team.
I've been waiting for the eye test conversation because that is the biggest thing that I've seen so much on Twitter, I've heard ESPN talking heads talk about it, all this stuff. And a lot of it is, you know, well, like I've seen a lot of people on Miami Twitter talk about, as dog walk Notre Dame in the first one. And if you just watch and pay attention to the games, the numbers, people always like to throw that out there, like the numbers back that up. So before the show today, I took a look at what the numbers told us about who looks the best and who's performing the best. And it's just, again, like we saw with the more granular metrics, it's just not close. It's not close at all. So here are some of the numbers in points per game. And I did this over the last 7 games. I wanted to give a good enough sample size to not say, the last 3 games, because in the last 3 games, Alabama and Miami have lost games. Notre Dame hasn't, but that's another conversation for another day. So I took the last 7 games that Miami, Notre Dame, and Alabama have played. In those, Notre Dame leads in points per game on offense. Notre Dame is scoring 37.9 points per game as a team over the last 7 games. Alabama is scoring 26.9. Miami is scoring 30.9. In yards per game, Notre Dame has an almost 100-yard advantage on Alabama. Notre Dame's at 472. Alabama's at 379.4. And those lists go on and on and on. I'm going to put these graphics up on the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com once the show is over, just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But it's just this eye test argument. They just look better. It's like, based on what? Based on what? I heard an ACC talking head say that, Notre Dame and Alabama essentially have they play the same schedule. I'm here to tell you that they don't. When you go and you look at, yes, they have ACC-like opponents. Okay. But Notre Dame's combined opponent record over the last 7 games is 37-34. Miami's is 33-37. They played 3 teams with losing records: Syracuse, Stanford, Florida. Notre Dame has played 2 teams with losing records, and that's Boston College and Arkansas over their last 7. There's just so many things that go to back this up. You want to talk about dominance, and Alabama's looked like the more dominant team. In their last 7 games, their average margin of victory is 9.5, and they lost their 7th game. So you can't calculate margin of victory if you lost. For Notre Dame, their average margin of victory over the last 7 games is 25.6 points. You tell me who the more dominant team is.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the team that's winning games by an average margin of 25.5 or the team winning by 9.5?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is surface level, because then you get into the conversation of the who. Who have you played? And I'm well aware of that fact. But the point of this is to say that can't be the end all be all.
Right.
Can't be. Everything has to be on the table when you evaluate it.
But even then, Trevor, the advantage goes to Notre Dame if you look at the who. So if you look at all the different things that people want to point to, they like to leave certain things out. I've noticed that. They like to leave certain data points out and say, hey, well, this might be true for this, but it's not true for that. And here's the reality of it, is that Notre Dame Alabama is not better than Notre Dame when you look at the models. It isn't. Like, you talk about who they beat and all that other kind of stuff. Look at the at the football power index. You look at the efficiencies. Notre Dame has the number 6 offense in the country. Alabama has number 13. Notre Dame has the number 13 defense. Alabama's number 11. So Alabama has the edge in one area. Notre Dame has the edge in another. But the gap where Notre Dame has an edge is much greater. And then there's this thing called special teams. And you're probably thinking, Notre Dame fans, like, oh, crap, we're screwed now. No, Notre Dame is 8th in special teams. Alabama's 126th in special teams. You look at the Fermo efficiency index, which is ironic. It's flipped. It has, if you look at Brian's thing, he has Alabama as the number 9 offense. Notre Dame's number 11. That changed recently with some of Notre Dame's recent struggles. On defense, however, he has Notre Dame 5th and Alabama 9th. So once again, it's a 1-to-1 comparison. Edge to Alabama on one, edge to Notre Dame on one, but the edge for Notre Dame is greater on the side that they have. And then you go to special teams. And again, you're going to think, oh, no, we're in trouble. Well, Notre Dame, according to the FEI, is the number 41 special teams in the country. Alabama on special teams is ranked 101st. So, well, special teams, yeah, special teams matters. I don't know, when you're playing a top 25 team at home and they score to take a fourth quarter lead and you respond by returning a kick for a touchdown to take the lead back that you never give back. Maybe one of the reasons that the A&M game was close is because you blocked the punt, returned it for a touchdown. Things like that. You're playing a ranked team on the road. You start the second half with a kick return that takes you out near midfield. Those things matter. That goes into the relative field position, which is something also the committee takes a look at that Notre Dame has the edge in. So those things all factor in, and they take in the data, the quality of the opponents. The College Football Nerd's own website, which does relative stats, which does models that are supposedly based off of who you play and how you beat teams. If you click in their model, their game simulator, Team 1 versus Team 2. Team 1 is Notre Dame, Team 2 is Alabama. And then you click on Model Me. Model prediction, Notre Dame 33.1, Alabama 24.3. What's that based off of? What happened on the field? Like, that's the whole thing. The data comes from what happens on the field. Say, well, hey, Alabama had, one loss last week and they were ahead of Georgia because their rankings were close and Alabama had the head-to-head. Notre Dame and Georgia and Miami's rankings aren't close. That's the difference. And yes, a second loss at home late in the season in a game where you lost for the same reasons you've been playing close games for a month is going to have an impact on you. Big impact on you. Like, that's the reality of it. So if you want to get down to this conversation, there is no metric that shows you Alabama is better than Notre Dame. If you look at it, it's an entirety. When you look at the eye test, here's a little eye test formula for you. Notre Dame has had more 40-point games against SEC teams than Alabama has had for the entire season. Not 40-point games against SEC teams. No, I'll say it again. Notre Dame has scored 40 points or more times against SEC opponents than Alabama has scored against their 10 opponents combined. Alabama has scored 40 points or more once. It was against Louisiana Monroe. Notre Dame has scored over 40 points way more than that, including against both of their ACC opponents. Notre Dame scored 40 points against Texas A&M, the number one ranked team in the SEC. They scored 56 points in a road win over Arkansas. Talk about relative points and relative data. Notre Dame's played an SEC team and beat them by 43. If you look at that same team who has played the number one ranked team in the SEC, the number 3 ranked team in the SEC, and also played what's Tennessee 6? Tennessee's 7th, right? It's Texas A&M, Georgia, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Alabama, Texas, Tennessee. Also played the number 7 team in the SEC, lost to them. So if you look at that data, they have lost 6 conference games, 6 conference games, right? In their 6 conference games, Trevor, they have lost by a grand total of, 25 points. 6 SEC games, they lost by a grand total of 25 points. Their one loss to Notre Dame, they lost by 43. So we have some data of how Notre Dame performs against SEC teams relative to how other teams in the SEC perform against those teams. And it shows you something that's very clear, that Notre Dame is the more dominant team. So now, could Miami have some data points in the next couple of weeks that could help them? Sure, they have opportunities to help themselves. When you look at, they have to play Pitt in a couple of weeks. If they go to Pitt and beat Pitt by 40, and Notre Dame doesn't have dominant wins over Syracuse and Stanford, could that allow Miami to vault over Notre Dame? Yeah, it could. If Alabama goes out and blows out Auburn in a game where Notre Dame beats Stanford by 10 and doesn't play well, could that vault Alabama over Notre Dame? Absolutely it could. And if the data shows it, should. Like, that's the reality. You have to accept that as a Notre Dame fan. That's why I say it's not just win and you're in. You have to continue doing what you've been doing that has you, the committee, liking you so much. And that's the reality of it. But there is no data point that you can point to when you look at it in its entirety. And this is the problem, Trevor, because in order to have this argument on Twitter, you have to kind of, use some common sense, use some logic, and that doesn't make you money. It doesn't make you money to put out a logical explanation, which I'm going to do later. So I'm going to take this article or this breakdown, and I'm going to actually put it into written form and make the case in written form. And in that article, like, I am not going to get a lot of clicks on that, and it's not going to like go viral and all these other kind of things, because I'm not going to title it Alabama's trash and this is why Notre Dame's ahead of them or whatever. I'm not going to feed into the rage. I'm going to say, here's the data. The reality is nowadays when you can when on X you can get paid off engagement, and on YouTube and your podcast you get paid off engagement, then you have to go engagement farming. And there's nothing, whether it's politics or sports, that feeds engagement like rage. And that's what people are feeding, sadly. And they know that. And if you have a logical argument, then you lose the rage. And then you don't make the kind of money you need to make. And that's a fact. I mean, you can just look at it, and it's either that or they're just not smart. But a real conversation, if you want to actually talk about what's happening in the committee room, then you have to look at all aspects of this. Surface level, the data that tells the story of what happens on the surface level, and then the eye test. The fact of the matter is Notre Dame beats Alabama in 2 of those 3. Notre Dame beats Oklahoma in 2 of those 3. And they beat Miami in all 3 of them. The only data point Miami has right now is the head-to-head, which matters. But here's the thing Miami fans aren't understanding. You having that head-to-head is the only reason you're even 13. Because if you take the Notre Dame game away, and let's say they played Iowa State in the opener, rematch of the bowl game, Miami's not close to 13 right now. They're 8-2 with 0 ranked wins and 2 losses to unranked teams with bad metrics. Let me pull those up again here for Miami so that you guys can see it. That's Miami's metrics. Really good on defense, very average on offense. They're not sniffing the top 15 if they don't have the win over Notre Dame. That's what they don't get. The win over Notre Dame is the only reason it's even close, because other than that, the resumes aren't even close. If you replace Notre Dame with some mediocre 5-5 team, you do realize that your best win now becomes South Florida. Like that would be their best win if you took the Notre Dame game away and scheduled somebody weak. Do you really think they're ranked ahead of Notre Dame if that's the case? The only reason that you're 13 is because of that. And I'd like to remind you a little bit about that win over South Florida. They beat South Florida by 37 points. Notre Dame beat Navy by 39. Right now, Notre Dame, Miami, or Navy is ahead of South Florida. They have a better record than South Florida. They also just played South Florida and beat South Florida the week after Notre Dame beat them by 39. It's not even close. What's Miami's next best win? You know what their next best win is, Trevor? It's kind of ironic. It's probably Florida State. It's either Florida State or NC State. And you say, well, yeah, we beat them by 5 more points than you did. That doesn't matter because NC State's like Notre Dame's 5th best win. Because Notre Dame beat a 7-3 Pitt team by 22 and dominated that game. So Notre Dame's 3rd best win is significantly better than Miami's 3rd best win. So when you're comparing Notre Dame's win over NC State, yeah, that's comparable, but that's Notre Dame's like 4th or 5th best win. That's Miami's 3rd best win. Miami's 5th best win is over what? Syracuse? 3-7 Florida? Like, that's the whole point. If you take that game away, that's the only reason Miami's even close. That's where it blows my mind that people who I otherwise respect, people like Josh Pate, people like Ari Wasserman, people like Andy Staples, people who I do respect, it's so frustrating listening to them make terrible arguments, terrible, shallow, surface level arguments, when in reality, they know better. Look at the data that the committee uses. You want to understand why the committee ranks teams where they are? Look at the data. Don't listen to some soundbite that the guy makes that only does that further enrages people. Look at the data. It's bad arguments. It's emotional arguments. It's shallow arguments. It's not just head-to-head. Well, you said earlier the resumes are similar. No, they're not, Trevor. Miami and Notre Dame's resumes are not similar. Not even close.
Oh, I mean, and the commissioner brought up something yesterday that I think needs to continue to be highlighted. I think Miami fans need to worry about, and also the ACC now, who is trying to fuel this campaign, which is a whole other thing. But I think Miami fans need to focus more on the teams directly in front of them. Stop worrying about a team that's ranked inside of the top 10 when there are 3 other teams ranked ahead of you. I just don't think it's that hard of a thing to understand. BYU right now on FanDuel has better odds to make the playoffs than what Miami does. Why aren't you up in arms about BYU? You want to talk about resumes and who hasn't beat anybody? Like, you have that conversation with BYU. Don't have that conversation with Notre Dame because the only thing that you have is head-to-head. That's it, which matters. That we've said several times on the show, it matters, but it's not the only thing that matters.
Right.
And
that is why they're 13th. I mean, seriously, take the Notre Dame game. Let's switch the resumes. Let's say Notre Dame beat Miami and Miami beat SMU. Do you think that Miami's 13th? No. They're much lower. They're down where Michigan is, if not lower than that. Because their resumes, I mean, you only played one good team all year and they beat you at your place. Like, that's the whole point. The head-to-head over Notre Dame is why they're 13th. You take that away, they're probably 18-22. That's the whole point. And maybe. I mean, I think at 8-2, they're probably, like Michigan-ish. You know what I mean? Like, they're probably in that conversation, 18-22. So that's the whole thing about this is it's lazy analysis. It's lazy reporting. What's funny is some of the stuff that Miami fans are using now are things that they were pissed that other people were using against them last year. And same thing with Alabama. So if you look at the data and you study the actual data, as we clearly showed you, we're not just making this stuff up. We're not talking feelings and emotion. This is where it's at. And eye test, again, same thing. Other than your feelings, there's no aspect of this that you can argue Alabama has a better overall resume. You're going to pick and choose your little data points that get people pissed off and try to pretend like that's all that matters. And it's not all that matters. The committee's been very clear about that. It's not all that matters. But this is what we're getting. And then people get angry and rage and they don't listen to reason because it's just easier for people. And you make more money when you just when you piss people off, you make more money than you do when you try to reason with people. That's the sad reality. That's true in politics. That's true in sports reporting. And that's what we're getting. It doesn't make it better analysis, though. It's crap analysis. It's emotional analysis. And that's not what we do. We get passionate about stuff, but we're going to be passionate. We're going to have reason behind our passion. And as I said before, go look at the numbers. I'll pull them up again. What about these resumes tells you that Alabama's better than Notre Dame? What about these resumes, which is based off of what teams have done on the field, makes you think that Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame?
Yep.
Nothing other than your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have more ranked wins. Okay, for now. I mean, that may not be true here in a little bit. Let's see how Miami, Oklahoma, and Missouri game goes this weekend. Let's see how the Vandy, Tennessee game goes in a couple weeks. But it's not like, could you imagine if the committee was that lazy? It would take you 20 minutes. It'd take you 20 minutes to put a rankings together. Well, this team beat that team and that team beat this. Let's put all the 0-loss teams in this category. Let's put all the 1-loss teams in this category. Like if you want to go off of record, then why are some of you not complaining that why is BYU not ahead of Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and Alabama?
Why is Georgia Tech the lowest seeded 1-loss team? That's right. A team in your league If you're going to be up in
That's
arms
right.
about something, like at least rally. I'll give the Big Ten and the SEC this: they rally around a cause, brother. Like like when other SEC teams get disrespected, like they will want to beat them. But if other teams in their conference get disrespected, they rally around that cause. Not the ACC though, man. The ACC will just call out Notre Dame for reasons that I just don't understand. Look, all of this data, all of this is all encompassing into one main argument. If you, which also falls in line with Notre Dame. If you just handle business at points throughout the season, you remove yourself from all of these. Well, if this beats this team and this metric with it, like I'm also frustrated with Notre Dame about that. Don't lose to one of Miami or Texas A&M by 1 point or 3.
Just beat one. Exactly.
Like
exactly.
It also falls in line with Notre Dame. If you're Miami, don't lose to one of the 2 unranked teams that you lost to. Especially after you saw what happened last year. The same thing happened to you last year, and they're here again. Just like, I don't know why. Because you lost to 2 teams, and one of them at home. Like, come on, man. It's not that hard to understand. And no, it wasn't they were ranked at the time but fell off. They were just never ranked. Like, SMU was, like, never ranked from the time that they played to now. Why? Because they're 6-4. Don't lose to that team. Don't schedule 9 games in a row in the state of Florida and then go on your first true road game out of state, lose it, and then be sitting there scratching your head why you're not 7th. Come on, man. Like, it's just not like all of the stats, everything we talked about are all factual, and it goes to prove the point and solidifies why Notre Dame should be where they're at. But just for all the surface level people out there that don't like to do research, that don't like, that's why I just say, if you handle business, then you're good. Alabama, don't get dominated on the road to open the season against the Florida State team that is now It's just not that hard to figure out. Hey, Notre Dame fans, Notre Dame, you can't be in this. Okay, well then we wouldn't be in this position where we're scoreboard watching every single week if they just didn't lose to one of Texas A&M or Miami. Them's the facts. So it goes all around. Texas fans, don't be mad. We only lost to Georgia on the road in Ohio State and Florida. That's 3-7. It's just not that hard to figure out, man. Really isn't.
It isn't. It's not hard at all, and that's what makes it frustrating. And it's what makes it frustrating because you see people that should otherwise be sound voices in the college football world that aren't. Because we're always just going to come across as, well, they're just Notre Dame fans. They're biased. Well, so are you very clearly, either towards a conference, a league, or making money. And there's just not enough just real analysis. Like, why I'm pissed that Notre Dame isn't ahead of Oregon, but I'm more pissed because of the fact that they lost a flip in Texas A&M. You know, like, it's a game you lost. Yes, the holding at the end of the game, it should have never come to that. Don't give up an 85-yard touchdown where you have the guy supposedly tackled at the 50-yard line. You know, don't turn the ball over and give A&M scores. Don't give up, you know what I mean? Like, don't blow coverages and allow them to get down the field. Don't get called for a dumb holding penalty that converts to 3rd and 16. Like, that was on you. You know, and that is frustrating, which is why we're not sitting there saying, like, because, like, here's the thing. If you were to just go off of eye test or how teams are playing lately, Notre Dame's a top 5 team. Like, every computer model says them as in that. Like, I just showed it again. FEI, FPI, Football Power Index, Sagarin, and then the SP Plus all have Notre Dame 6, 5, or 4. But are you hearing us advocate for that? No, because they did lose to the 2 best teams that they played. 2 of the 3 best teams they played. USC's better than Miami. They did lose to 2 of the 3 best teams that they played. You know, like, so you're going to believe Paul Feinbaum instead of Nick Saban? Somebody in the chat's made a great point. Nick Saban has said for multiple weeks Notre Dame's one of the 5 best teams in the country. But we're going to ignore him and listen to Paul Feinbaum? Bruce Feldman? Why? Because it makes you feel better? Because they actually agree with what you're saying? No, it's like somebody in the chat earlier said that there's a report, and I don't know if this is true or not, that the 3 football coaches on the committee are very high on Notre Dame. Yeah, because they actually watched the games. Isn't that what we want? Don't we want people that watch the games and say that team's better than that team despite some surface level analysis of their resumes?
Big picture, yeah. But unfortunately, the thing that you're forgetting, Brian, is that people want people to watch football games, but only their games. Not all games, just their games. That's
Right.
the issue, unfortunately.
Right.
People just want
Yeah.
support for their narratives. That's it. They're down for stats and down for research if it only supports their claim.
Right.
And that's unfortunate.
Right. And there's a comment here from probably a Miami fan, but we aren't comparing Miami to SMU or Louisville. The comparison is to Notre Dame, and they beat them. There is no debate. There is no debate that Miami beat Notre Dame. But if you're that simple that you think that's all that matters, then A, you have no clue how the committee works, and B, you're not intellectually honest enough to actually have a grown-up conversation with us. You're just some troll Miami fan who's unwilling to actually make a real argument. I think Notre Dame is a better team than Georgia. I think if Notre Dame played Georgia right now, Notre Dame would win. You know who agrees with me, Trevor? The college football nerds model playoff or game simulator model. They have Notre Dame 35-29. Have you heard me once say that Notre Dame should be ranked ahead of Georgia?
No.
No. Because the data doesn't show that. The results on the field don't show that. So, look, this is not the show to come here with silly surface level, shallow, lazy narratives because you're just going to get kind of destroyed and look stupid.
Oh, 100%.
I'd advise you not to do that.
And I give you a shot at redemption. What's Miami done since then? Just put it in the chat. Since beating Notre Dame, what have they done since then to be ranked ahead of Notre Dame? Yeah. And I'll wait.
Because I'll say this, Trev, while we're waiting, why isn't SMU and Louisville ranked ahead of Miami? They beat them head-to-head. No debate. Beat them head-to-head. No debate. So why aren't they ranked ahead of Miami? Well, they have a worse record. So what you're saying is the context of your entire season should go into this. That's where it comes from. Of course, he copped out, which I expected. So that's you. So there it is, Trev. We have some super chats we'll bring up during this segment of the show.
Go.
And then we're going to go into keys to victory. But the reality is this: is we just showed you the data. Argue with the data. If you're in your feelings about it, here's the data. We'll show it to you again. There's the data. So and we put all of it. We didn't leave things out that favor Bama. I didn't leave out strength of schedule or strength of record because that favors Alabama. I put all of it in there. It's all in there. That's your case. It's about who you are over the course of an entire season, not who was better in week 1, who was better in week 7. Why isn't Florida State ranked ahead of Alabama? They won the head-to-head because their entire resume is not as good. It's as simple as that. And anyone willing to have an honest conversation, they're going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just it's frustrating when you see people that should know better make these lazy arguments with an absolute unwillingness to look at the data.
Or just have a realistic conversation. If you're going to pound your fist on the table that head-to-head is the only thing that matters, and you also conclude, and I'm not even going back into the history books, I'm talking about this season. If head-to-head is the only thing that matters, and that's it, that's the end-all, be-all, it was handled on the field, all stuff I've heard the last 1 hour, 9 minutes, and now 15 seconds and counting. That head-to-head is the only thing that mattered, that happened on the field. Then you also agree that Florida State should be ranked ahead of Alabama. You think that Texas should still be ranked ahead of Florida. You think that Alabama should still be ranked ahead of Georgia. It just, the list goes on and on and on and on. If that is the only thing that matters. And if that's your thought process, nothing that I'm going to say or do or any graphic that I put up is going to change your opinion. So we can just, as people like to say, agree to disagree. But I'm telling you right now that the argument's just not going to get you that far. Not going to get you that far. Yeah. Arizona State should be ranked ahead of Texas Tech. Agreed. Yeah.
Yep.
Michigan should be ranked ahead of Ohio State last year.
Yep.
Oklahoma
should have automatically vaulted Michigan into the playoffs.
Should have. Head-to-head matters. It's the only thing. They handled it on the field, Brian. We saw it.
Yeah. And I don't know why people thought Miami should got in the playoff last year. It probably should have been Georgia Tech or Syracuse since they beat Miami head-to-head. Syracuse won 10 games last year. Miami won 10 games last year.
Kentucky should have been ranked ahead of Ole Miss last year.
Yep. Florida also should have been ranked ahead of Ole Miss last year, apparently. Beat them.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. It's a good point. Northern Illinois should have been ahead of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Dang.
So, yeah. Yeah. But, of course, that's not true. Because why is Texas Tech ranked ahead of Arizona State? Because context. Texas Tech didn't have their starting quarterback, and they've literally dominated the other 10 teams they've played. Have you heard us once say that Notre Dame I think if Notre Dame played Texas Tech right now, I think Notre Dame wins. That's my opinion. Based on analysis and watching film, I think they would beat Texas Tech, right? The computer model believes that. But you know who we've never said Notre Dame should be ranked ahead of? Texas Tech. Why? Because their resume's better and their stats are better. Their data's better. They've been more dominant in the teams they've played. So my feeling is that Notre Dame would beat Texas Tech in a head-to-head. But I'm not going to argue they should be ranked ahead of Texas Tech because their resume is not as good. A true resume is not as good. I think Notre Dame would beat Ole Miss in a game. I think Ole Miss is like, and if you look at the common opponent that they've played, Ole Miss needed a comeback win to beat. They actually had to hold off Arkansas at the end 2 weeks before Notre Dame beat Arkansas by 43. But have you heard me argue that Notre Dame should be ranked ahead of Ole Miss? No. Because their resume is better. That's the whole point. The entirety of their resume is better. Not my feelings, but the entirety of their resume is better. So it's frustrating. But let's get to some Super Chats, Trev, before we get out of here.
Super chat from Brian's Balloons LLC. Was initially surprised when I saw Notre Dame was above Alabama. After taking the time to look at Bama, Oklahoma, and Notre Dame statistically, Notre Dame should be ahead of both. Bama's one-dimensional on offense, and Oklahoma doesn't play offense.
And Bama's not even that good in their one dimension. I mean, like everybody talks about their one. I don't know that they're any dimensional. They're averaging 31.6 points per game. That's with them scoring 73 points against Louisiana Monroe. If you look at Alabama against their scoring offense against Power 4 teams, they're scoring 27 points per game. 27 points per game. Oh, they're really good throwing the football. Are they? Are they really? Alabama's 12th in the country in passing yards because they throw a lot. They rank there because they throw the ball. Let's see, pass attempts. Alabama ranks, where are they at in attempts? Let me go here. Alabama ranks 31st in pass attempts. They are 29th in yards per pass attempt. They are 14th in passer rating. I'll give you some data. So Alabama in yards per attempt, in total yards is ahead of Notre Dame. They're at 294.7. And Notre Dame is at, let's pull up Notre Dame here real quick if I could spell. Notre Dame is at 265.7. They're ranked 30th. So Alabama does it more. Alabama this year is, let's see here, they are a whopping 29th in yards per pass attempt. Trev, Notre Dame is second behind Air Force at 9.8. Alabama on the season as a passer rating, they're 14th at 159.48. Notre Dame is third at 171.14. Notre Dame even has a higher completion percentage than Alabama, despite the fact they throw the ball down the field more than Alabama does. So it's kind of like, well, they're not even good at throwing the football. They're solid at throwing the football, and they can't run for anything. So, no, I don't think that Alabama's no dimensional on offense. Their defense is the only reason they're winning games right now.
Yeah, I would argue Oklahoma's the more one-dimensional offense than Alabama because at least Oklahoma can run the ball.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just – and their defense is even better, clearly.
Yeah.
So, it's just – It's a very frustrating argument. Trevor, it's a very frustrating argument. And by the way, I'm just going to do some. I like numbers right now, Trev. CJ Carr has a higher completion percentage. Actually, does CJ Carr have that, or does that the Notre Dame team? Well, before I say this, I want to make sure I'm accurate here. So let's see here. So Alabama, Ty Simpson is at. Okay, I was correct. CJ Carr has a higher completion percentage than Ty Simpson. He's 67.3. Ty Simpson 66.9. It's close. CJ Carr has thrown 55 passes, 20 yards or more past the line of scrimmage. Ty Simpson has thrown 45. So CJ has a higher completion percentage despite throwing the ball 10 times more on throws 20 yards or more. Let me give you one more little nugget here, Trev. Let's see here. Let's go back to Notre Dame. But, so Alabama's not even better at throwing the ball than Notre Dame, throwing the ball down the field more than Notre Dame. They're not, it's they just do it more. That's it. They do it more. And I would also like to point out that 2 of Notre Dame's best passing games of the season came against SEC opponents. I just want to point that out. 2 of CJ Carr's best games were against Texas A&M and Arkansas. Just want to point that out. Those vaunted SEC teams. So, yeah, I would agree. And it's funny. I had no idea what was going on there. So, basically, my phone was reading my body language because when I went like this during the show, it showed a thumbs up.
It's the peace sign. When you're on FaceTime or anything that shows, the peace sign is what makes the balloons go up.
Okay. So, I was like, I went like 2 and then so I'm like, what is going on right now? I hope that didn't show up on the camera on the thing. I hope that's just on my phone. But yes, that
it was funny when it came up too, because we were in the post-game show and you were spitting something, and I just saw balloons come up, and I was like, okay, I guess even your phone knows you're spitting something.
Even my phone knows I'm on fire, baby.
I was like, okay, there we go.
Pretty wild. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. Another super chat from Brian's Balloons LLC. I'm finally in the same boat as Brian when it comes to where Notre Dame should be ranked.
I'm finally in the same boat as Brian. Where were you before, Deco? I'm curious. Were you thinking they should be below? I'm just curious about that. Like, were you thinking they were higher? Were you thinking they were lower? I'm just curious about that. I think he was meaning they were lower because based on his previous super chat, but yeah.
Super chat from Beast. Super chat from Beaston 88. Notre Dame in every metric has the better resume. 1993 Notre Dame Florida State happened, and that can't be ignored in this scenario. I bring up to any social media post I see.
I repeat, I'll say the other day, I will grant that Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame if the ACC and Florida State are willing to give their 1993 championship to Notre Dame. Same record. Notre Dame won the head-to-head. Controlled the game, by the way. Led almost the entire game. Florida State scored first. And I think Notre Dame scored the next 24 points. And Florida State never. Only tie of the game, 0-0 and 7-7.
Well, what's funny is I've seen this quite a bit in the chat today about, like, don't even have a playoff, just let a committee decide. It's like, well, that also wouldn't work out in your favor because, like we've seen, per this, the head-to-head team that lost in the head-to-head ended up winning the national championship in 1993. So it still wouldn't work out in your favor either.
Yeah, agree. So I will forever say that Miami deserves to be ranked ahead of Notre Dame. If the ACC and Florida State say that we don't deserve the 1993 national championship, Notre Dame was screwed over by the voters, that championship should go to Notre Dame. They won't say that. What will they say? Yeah, Notre Dame was better that day, but Florida State beat more ranked teams that year, which is true. They'll say, hold on a second. Now, yeah, they were better that day, but you go look at the course of the season, they also beat number 17 Clemson. They beat number 13 North Carolina. They beat number 3 Miami. They beat number 15 Virginia. They beat number 7 Florida on the road, and then they beat number 2 Nebraska in a bowl game, whereas Notre Dame beat number 1 Florida State, but their only other wins were number 3 Michigan and number 7 Texas A&M. So the resume for Florida State on the whole is stronger, is what their argument will be. Exactly. So when the ACC and Florida State are willing to say, we don't deserve the 1993 championship, we are giving that back to Notre Dame, we call on the NCAA to recognize Notre Dame as the 1993 champions. When you do that, then I will give two rips about what you think about how important head-to-head is when determining who a team is for the entirety of the season.
Lou Holtz, Thunder and Bolts, thank you for the super chat. Bring on the disrespect. We'll use it effectively into the playoffs. Hashtag, we're Notre Dame, and they ain't.
They hate us because they ain't us, and that's very, very true. I hope the Notre Dame football team is hearing all of this and uses it as like motivation. Like, okay, you don't think we're good? You don't think we belong? Okay, cool. We're going to show you.
You know, Brian, it's funny because in the preseason, you and I talked about, it's like, this team is going to have to find different ways to motivate itself because we'd yet to see Notre Dame stack successful seasons on top of one another. And shout out to the national media for just having a buffet of locker room billboard material. Shout out to them.
Yep. Yep.
Another one from Lou Holtz, Thunder and Bolts. Appreciate the super chat. This whole discourse is similar to countless disciplinary talks with my kids. The frustration reflects a deeper ignorance of the rules or blatant desire to change them, or both, but not applying them as they are.
That's a great comment. Absolutely great comment, man. Yeah. That is spot on.
If what
I don't like the rules, so I'm going to cry about it. Yeah, that's what's going on right now.
If what I am enduring with this whole Notre Dame playoff conversation is any indication of what I put my parents through, let me take this time to issue a public apology to Jeff and Heidi Gilbert because good night.
Yes.
Super chat.
Absolutely.
Super chat from Joseph Pachuta. Thank you for the super chat. Hate to break it to Miami, but ever since 1993, head-to-head matchups don't mean jack.
Yep.
Fighting Mike 87. Why was it okay? Thank you for the super chat. Why was it okay for Ohio State to get a home college football playoff game last year based on eye test, but won't be for Notre Dame? I don't recall any rage towards Ohio State, only towards Day.
What's funny is all the things that people use to defend Ohio State's ranking last year are the things that the committee is using to justify Notre Dame's ranking this year. Everybody jumped on board with it last year. They ignore it with Notre Dame. And I don't know if this is true or not. Somebody said that Cole Kubelic was making the case that Alabama has better athletes than Notre Dame, or Notre Dame doesn't have the athletes Alabama had. I pray that Cole didn't say that because I adore Cole and think he does a great job. But that's like part of it is because Ohio State gets the benefit of that. There's an assumption that, yeah, Ohio State has SEC caliber athletes. Despite what Notre Dame is doing on the field against SEC teams, they're not getting the benefit of the doubt in that regard. And it does get frustrating. But you are absolutely correct. That's what frustrates me with so much of this is the lack of consistency with what people are saying. And I've used this argument before to defend other teams, Trevor. The same argument I'm using for Notre Dame is the exact same argument I used to defend Indiana last year. No, their resume doesn't maybe look all that great, but what did they do to everybody they played? They dominated, except for one team, Ohio State. Well, Ohio State was probably the best team in the country last year. So, regular season, this is like going into the playoff. Yeah, they stubbed their toe, but they're still probably the most talented team in the country. And Ohio State proved themselves to be the number one team in the country with how they performed in the playoffs. But it's the same thing with Ohio State last year. But guess what? Ohio State didn't get the jump into the 4, 5, 6, or 7 because of their resume. They were fit right where they should have been in the 8 seed. They were ranked, I think, ended up being 6th. There's a lot more chaos last year than we've seen even this year. But the whole point, or so far, there's still a couple weeks left. But the point was their losses were bad. Well, their one loss was bad to an unranked Michigan team. They had the Penn State win. They had the Indiana win. They had some ugly wins, Nebraska. So they kind of found that happy medium ground of being right there at 8, at 10-2. That's where Ohio State, should have been. They should have been ahead of Tennessee. But they shouldn't have been higher than that. And, it's the same thing for Notre Dame this year. Notre Dame, to me, is one of the – I think Notre Dame is – Trev, you said something to me the other day, and I love this quote. Correct me if I'm wrong. You said Notre Dame is one of the 5 best teams in the country, and they're not 5th. I think is what you said, correct?
That is correct.
I would argue they're not 4th either. But again, they don't belong there from a ranking standpoint because the resume top to bottom because the results do matter. The difference is some of you that are making the case against Notre Dame want to only focus on certain results while ignoring all the other. We're looking at all of them. We're not ignoring the 2 losses. We're not trying to overhype the 2 losses either. You have never once heard me make a strong argument for they're here because they've got great losses. I will mention their losses are better than your losses, and then I move on because it's just a small data point to me. My argument for Notre Dame is this is where they should be ranked based on what they've done in the 8 games since then. And the reason that Notre Dame is 9th and not 3rd or 2nd is because of those first 2 games, which count. But there's a reason why nobody's bitching about Utah, BYU, Alabama, whose resume is not strong. There's a reason they're not all up in arms about Oklahoma's otherwise kind of mediocre resume. And it's because it's Notre Dame. And number one, there's a natural bias and hatred for Notre Dame. And number 2, they know that Notre Dame makes them money. Simple as that. If the roles were reversed, you'd see some of these same people writing articles that are pro Notre Dame articles because then that's how they would get their money.
Oh, yeah. ICURN with Irish Luck. Appreciate the super chat. I don't understand the national media uproar about Bama. I have asked all of them, take the committee ranking grading. Who do you honestly think would win? Nobody actually thinks Alabama would win.
Mm-hmm. I actually think a lot of them do think a lot of people in the media do think Alabama would win. But I still think that there's this notion that, well, they're in the SEC, so they have to be better. They're still living in a pre-NIL, pre-transfer portal world where the SEC stacked all the talent. And that's just not the world we're living in. I mean, I don't know what else evidence you need to see that. But you haven't been dominant outside of your conference the way that you used to be. You just haven't. So that's just kind of the reality. Like, I think some of them think Bama would win. And what, just kind of looking at it from this standpoint, the good thing for Notre Dame is you get a chance to prove it on the field because right now the odds are pretty good that Notre Dame's going to play an SEC team in round 1, either on the road or at home. If there's one more upset above them, then I just think Alabama and Notre Dame kind of move up a spot. That's it. Especially if Oklahoma's a team that gets upset. Yeah. Like, let's say, Missouri or LSU beats Oklahoma, then that kind of, it makes one of Alabama's wins look better. It'll either make the LSU or the Missouri win look better, but then it hurts one of their losses and makes one of their losses look not as good. But they just both would kind of bump up. The other thing is I could see a scenario where there's a couple losses. Let's say Ole Miss loses and Oklahoma loses. Then I think what would happen is Notre Dame would move up to 7, and you'd probably have Ole Miss there at 10. So I think either way, you're either going to play at Oklahoma, at Alabama, or home against Alabama. There is a world in which they both move up and Notre Dame gets leaped by Bama. Let's just say, let's say that Oklahoma gets beat by Missouri this weekend and Notre Dame beats Syracuse. And so there's really no movement. Notre Dame moves up a spot. Then in the last game of the year, and somebody brought this up, because Auburn's viewed better than their record by the computers and all that. So let's say Notre Dame beats Stanford by 10 and Alabama beats Auburn by 40. And they leap Alabama right in front of Notre Dame. Okay, whatever. Like, I won't like it. I think it's BS, but fine. The point is, looking at it, you're going to most likely play an SEC team, which gives you the chance to once again go prove it on the field.
What's going to be even funnier is if this scenario plays out, is if USC beats Oregon and then USC jumps Miami.
That's going to be freaking hilarious.
That's going to be, oh man, we thought Miami fans were mad now.
But Miami has a chance to play themselves into the mix still.
Yep. Yeah.
If you go out and handle your business the next 2 weeks the way you should, then they'll have a better argument to make than they do right now. That's the whole point. The data can change based on the on-field results. And so we'll just have to see how those play out. But yeah, I understand it, because I think that part of what we're missing is it's not only just about some people believe that. Some people only moderately believe it, but they're taking the strong stance that they do, because again, you start once X started paying anyone that could apply money for how much engagement you got. This is exactly why Twitter has become the absolute train wreck that it is. Because now any common person can go I can say any crazy thing I want, and if I get enough engagement, I'm going to make money off of it. And then there's the dopamine hit some people get by how many likes they have. And, it's I know people that they can tell you exactly how many followers they have on Twitter. I don't know. Hey, did you see that post I had? It had X amount of likes. I have no clue how many likes my posts get. So there's all those things that factor into it, but some of it's just performative. Not for everyone, but for some people, it very clearly is, especially people who are using the exact arguments against Notre Dame now that they used against Notre Dame back in 2018, like Dan Walken, who's trash. But again, the argument he's using now, the pro-Miami argument he's using now, is the opposite of the argument he was making for Michigan in 2018. In 2018, he was trying to argue that Michigan, who had a worse record than Notre Dame, remember, Notre Dame was undefeated in 2018. Michigan had a loss. That they should be ahead of Notre Dame because, well, if they played now, Michigan's a better team. That game doesn't matter as much. He's like, well, some of y'all don't have reading. No, we have reading comprehension, Dan. We just all can read and recognize that you're a hack and suck at your job. But you keep getting, pumped up because it's a very incestuous type of profession. And you can get clicks. But it was a terrible argument then. But if you're going to at least be consistent, I might respond. No, I still wouldn't respect them. But I at least give him credit for this one. Hey, you know what? He's applying the same logic now that he used then. But now you're going to say that head-to-head is some trump card, despite the fact no honest person thinks even Miami fans, I honestly think, if they were to have put the Wonder Woman lasso of truth on it, would be like, yeah, if they played again now, Notre Dame would dog walk them. That's the expression they all like to use. Like, Notre Dame didn't play well, dominated you. You guys aren't making the point you think you're making. You keep talking about how bad Notre Dame played. They still only won by 3. You're not really making the point you think you are. I agree. Notre Dame played like crap in the opener. Still only lost by 3. Had the ball at the end of the game with a chance to win. You're not making the point you think you are.
Yeah, that is the one thing I do agree with Miami fans about that Notre Dame-Miami game, is Notre Dame did play like garbage in that game.
Mm-hmm.
They did.
Yeah.
Another one from ICURN with Irish Luck. Appreciate the super chat. I want Brian to go on Crane & Co. with data and educate.
So I don't really know what they're saying. I can't really push back on their arguments because I didn't hear their arguments. But if they're arguing that Alabama should be ahead of Notre Dame, that's just wrong. They're incorrect.
Well, folks,
there's an argument to make. Let me say, there's an argument to make for Bama to be ahead. But as I've said all along, it's a surface level argument, and you're intentionally not diving into the data that the committee uses to make a point that you believe, as opposed to letting what you believe be driven by the actual reality of the situation in the data. That's the problem a lot of people are going to have.
Well said. Well, folks, that's going to do it for part 1 of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to dive into keys to victory on offense for Notre Dame in their matchup this Saturday with Syracuse. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like button. You are subscribed to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you know whenever we go live. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're going to be talking keys to victory for Notre Dame's offense in their senior day matchup this Saturday afternoon with Syracuse. Kickoff is at 3:30 p.m. inside of Notre Dame Stadium. Final regular season home game for Notre Dame this year. And right now, the Irish are currently favored by 35.5 points by our friends over at FanDuel, which is a pretty hefty margin. But Notre Dame is the current winners of 8 games in a row. And unfortunately, the Syracuse Orange have lost 6 games in a row after the unfortunate injury to quarterback Steve Angeli. But like we do every week, we're diving into keys to victory here. And we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. And Brian, you and I talked a lot putting this list together for both the offense and the defense. And yes, Notre Dame has to respect every opponent. And to a degree, we at Irish Breakdown do talk about respecting every opponent that you play. But like we said yesterday, folks, this isn't a scenario where if Notre Dame doesn't come out firing on all cylinders, Syracuse could rip off an upset in South Bend. They're not. They're struggling right now. Injuries have plagued them. They're starting a redshirt freshman or a freshman walk-on quarterback. Like Fran Brown has struggled this year, and it's not just on him. They've overcame a lot. There have been some staff changes. But that being said, this is about, look, playoffs are right around the corner for this team. And there are some things that we have to see that fall in line with keys to victory and what we have to see with them moving forward that are going to be crucial in this one, Brian. This is an interesting matchup in South Bend on Saturday.
It is, Trevor. I mean, this is interesting, not from the Notre Dame Syracuse matchup is interesting. It's interesting from the standpoint of what is Notre Dame going to be? Who are they going to be in this game? What fuels them? Have they learned, as Marcus Freeman tries to get all his teams to learn, it's not about your opponent, it's about you? Have they learned that? I don't think this team always felt that way early in the year. I'm hoping that the last couple games kind of are part of the evolution process where they've just dominated two ranked opponents. I mean, people keep talking about, oh, they don't play anybody. I'm like, literally their last two games were against college football playoff ranked teams. Because Navy was in the first college football playoff ranking. That weekend, Notre Dame beat them by 39. Pitt was in was Pitt in both? Pitt was in the first two because they were ranked and then they had a bye. So we said they're not going to fall out because they have a bye.
Well, then they actually went up.
Right. But yeah, they went from
lost.
24 to 22. Right. And then they played Notre Dame, got destroyed, and now they're out. So, if Pitt would have played Notre Dame as close as Missouri played Alabama, Pitt's probably still ranked. But they didn't because they got destroyed by Notre Dame. So this is about Notre Dame. This is a game where you look at and say, who is Notre Dame? And now that there's this, what's in front of them, can they come out against an inferior opponent and be focused on doing their job? And that's what a lot of our keys are going to be about today, Trevor, is part of it's, you got to do X and, A, B, and C against Syracuse, but this is more about Notre Dame growing as a football team. And that's what a lot of our keys are going to be. And so it's not so much if you do this, you can neutralize this advantage that Syracuse might have. There's literally zero advantages that Syracuse has. This game is about Notre Dame. And Notre Dame showing maturity as a football team to say, hey, we're going to go out there and handle our business because we're Notre Dame. And that's the reality of it. So as we dive into the offensive keys, Trevor, just keep in mind, folks, that's kind of where a lot of these keys are. These are keys about Notre Dame showing us something about Notre Dame and then taking the fight to Syracuse the way that they're capable of, more so than a reaction to what they're good at. So like last week, looking at Pitt offensively, we're saying you got to try to find some balance on offense. Why? Because this is a really good Pitt defensive, like front and linebacking core, and they're good against the run. It was specific to what you have to do to beat Pitt. With Syracuse, there's a million different ways they could beat Syracuse. So this is more about this football team growing. And so that's what our focus is going to be on.
Like we do every week, Brian, we're going to start with key number one on the offense, and it begins with starting fast. And that is something that this team hasn't done consistently. Consistency is kind of the base of this argument of really some of these keys. They didn't start fast against Pitt. They missed a field goal on their first offensive possession while starting, I believe, in Pitt territory after a fourth down sack by Josh Burnham. Yeah. And they didn't come away with points.
Two of their first three possessions started in Pitt territory. The other one started at their own 46. I think.
Yeah. They started fast against Navy, scored on their first offensive possession. They didn't against Boston College. And I'm looking right now, and they did against USC as well. So it's kind of been this yes, no type of pattern for Notre Dame with the playoffs looming around the corner. It is now time to, especially with the two level of opponents that you have coming up, it's time to start stacking these and start fast, hot out of the gate.
I think the biggest thing for me with starting fast in this game, Trevor, is just shows us where this team's focus is.
Yeah.
If they don't come out and just kind of really take it to Syracuse early, it tells me that this offense is not locked in. They're just not. They're not. And it also tells me that this coaching staff struggles with what makes this team click. And they're not able to push the right buttons to really get this offense to come out smoking hot. That's what it would tell me. These are not games. These are the games where, for the most part, however, this season, they have come out and started fast. I mean, Purdue, Arkansas, Navy. The BC game in this regard is the anomaly. When you look at how Notre Dame has fared against far inferior opponents. I don't view Boise as far inferior. I don't view NC State as far inferior. They didn't come out great in either one of those games, but this is not that. This team is far below those. So I think this is something where the coaching staff has to prove that we have the pulse of this team and we know what to do to push the right buttons to make sure this team is focused. Because if they're focused, they'll perform well. Part one. That's part two is just kind of getting into a rhythm, building confidence. I think the next two games for the offense are going to be really important towards really getting CJ Carr to the point where he's not pressing as much. I think CJ feels he's got to do all these things to go out there and win football games. I got to make this play and this big throw, getting him out of some bad habits, like, locking in on receivers and be better at like just reading the defense as opposed to just like, post snap as opposed to just the pre-snap reads, getting into some rhythm, getting some momentum, getting the offensive line really going in the run game, all these different things. And we'll talk about some of these more specifically. But like that's what starting fast is. It's about building some momentum and some confidence and really get this unit clicking as you go into the period of time between the end of the regular season and the playoffs. And of course, part of starting fast too is you need a dominant win these next 2 weeks. You have to look like an elite team. You have to look like that top 5 team that we all think that they are and put this team away early, because there is going to be some comparisons of, well, this is what Miami did to Syracuse. Well, they were beating them 14-0 at halftime, beat them 38-10. They were only beating Stanford 7-7 at halftime, but they beat them 42-7. That's going to get looked at as you get closer to the end of the season. And if Miami is able to climb up the ranks, those are when those things come into play. So you need to make sure that everything else you have in comparison to Miami is significantly better. So I think all of those things are part of it, coming out fast. But it's more so just about this team finding it. So CJ Carr can't be worried about, we got to score 70 points in order to impress the playoff committee. That's more us just talking about it. Mike Denbrock can't be worried about that, because then you start getting out of your normal routine. Just come out, focus, locked in, and say, every time we touch the ball, we're going to go score. That's really what it boils down to, because we can.
Yeah.
And so we're going to finally be who we, not finally, because they have had some great moments, but we're going to be the best version of ourselves, which some weeks we show and some weeks we don't.
Yes.
And this week we are.
Finally be consistent is a good way to put that, Brian. And I think you're spot on. If they just come out and execute, they start fast, which leads us into our second point, which is, more creativity and, more consistency in the run game. Again, common theme here is consistency. Putting up 50 points, 60 points, or whatever they are capable of, that's a byproduct of just handling business. To your point about CJ pressing and feeling like they have to do this, and Mike Denbrock feeling like they have to do that. Starting fast, and then key number 2, consistency in the run game is going to be huge. And this is actually something that I'm very curious to see how this plays out on Saturday, because there has been a common theme so far this season that when Notre Dame is in a position where they're playing a like opponent, I don't want to say like an equivalent opponent, because I don't know if I'm ready to put USC on the same level as Notre Dame or Pitt on the same level of Notre Dame. But when, maybe the better way to word it is just not playing a significantly inferior opponent. The run game, there is a vast difference in the creativity in the run game. The creativity in the run game versus BC and Navy was not as creative as what it was with Pitt and USC. And so I'm very curious to see what Mike Denbrock and Joe Rudolph do this week, playing a rush defense like Syracuse that has just struggled all season long. So key number 2, Brian, consistency in the run game is going to be huge on Saturday and moving forward.
It is, Trev. I mean, if you look at the last 4 games, I mean, the numbers look great. I mean, last 4 games, Notre Dame has rushed for 222.3 yards per game. That's 889 yards. So that'd be 73 carries plus 74. That's all. Let me type it in here. 147. So 889 yards divided by 147 carries. So they're at 6.0 yards per carry. on the whole, that looks great. But numbers don't always tell you the story. For example, Notre Dame rushed for 249 yards against Navy. They rushed for 175 against Pitt. I think the 175 against Pitt were more impressive than the 249 against Navy. The 159 against BC was just bad. That was a team you should have run the ball on more. Now, part of it is they loaded the box and said, we're not going to let you beat us running the ball. You're going to have to beat us throwing the ball. And Notre Dame kind of did. And then, of course, they ran for 306 against USC. It's sort of that up and down, up and down. You know, they went 3 weeks in a row. They ran the ball relatively well, 254 against Purdue, 210 against Arkansas, 200 against Boise. And you had a rough game against NC State, 143. USC, you went for 306. I would like to point out that all these rough games and low games all are more than Alabama averages for the season. So, you know, that 143 that Notre Dame had against NC State, which you and I considered like a really bad performance running the football, is still, Trevor, about 45, let me look it up, 45 yards more than what Alabama averages on the season. Notre Dame's disappointing performance of 143 yards against NC State would be the third best total of the season for Alabama running the football. I just want to point that out. So that's a different comment. And by the way, the Alabama high of rushing the season for 212 yards came against Louisiana Monroe. Just want to point that out. But it's a consistency. It's a consistency from a snap to snap basis. And this is what's going to partly happen when you have a bunch of new starters in the lineup. Against USC, you had one new starter at center, and you had, you know, he got a little bit of a trial by fire in the second half of the game before because Ashton Craig got hurt in the second half against NC State. But you had that one guy with veterans around him, you know, Billy Schrouth on one side. Well, then Billy goes down in that USC game, and then you're coming into the BC game with now two new starters in your lineup, and your entire interior was basically newbies. Redshirt freshman Gerby Lambert, he started all year, but he's still new. It's only his 8th career start. Joe Wadding making his 2nd career start. Absher making his 1st career start. So, of course, there's going to be some inconsistency, and you come out against Navy, and you have similar inconsistency, but you're still able to rip off some big plays. Against Pitt, I think they showed more consistency for the most part. So they got better. And that's why, again, my data had them down for, what did I have, Trev? Like 187 rushing yards, I think is what I had for Notre Dame in that game. Let me pull it up. Against Pitt. Now, the official stats were 175 rushing yards, but obviously sacks are part of that.
Yeah,
and
I think it was 187.
That's 187 on 33 attempts, 5.7 yards per carry. I also took out the swing pass to Jeremiah Love because I know that counts as a run in official stats, but it's not a run, and we're trying to evaluate their job of actually running the football. Yeah. 187 yards on 33 carries against Pitt is really good. And you could see it. You could see them working better together. Now it's building on that because this may you think you're going to get Billy Schrouth in the playoffs. You don't know that for sure. Notre Dame hasn't told us that definitively that that's going to happen. This may be your line, and one of the two is definitely going to be starting the rest of the year. So it's about getting them going, getting them on the same page, and developing some consistency. Part of that's schematically calling plays that put them in position to attack the weaknesses of the defense and not just running, you know, mid-zone duo and you know every play. That's part of it too. But really what I'm looking for here is this offensive line has to do one thing the rest of the year. Just get better at putting a body on a body because you have the best backfield in college football. And I don't know that anyone that like has a brain debates that anymore. You just got to get a body on a body and let those guys work. Do that, and this run game will become more consistent. But like you saw it last week, some of the plays where they weren't making plays, it was center gets beat, guard gets beat, nobody accounts for this guy, nobody blocks that guy. It was some of that stuff. Limit that, and your run game will take off.
And if they're able to do that, Brian, that feeds us into our third point is they're going to have much more success enhancing the passing game. Now, I really like this key, and I'm going to toss this over to you because it's what we've seen so far from Notre Dame in the pass game. I don't want to call it like vanilla, but they have been running some of the same concepts. They've been doing a lot of the same things over the last couple of weeks. And this pass game will have to take a step forward. Not that it's been bad, but it has room to take a step forward before they get to the playoffs as well.
Well, where I look at it, Trevor, I do think that there is some aspects where teams now have a lot of film on Notre Dame. They know the concepts they like to run. and they're starting to jump them more. And I think that's a part of some of the success that Pitt had in that game. I mean, we're also 2 games removed from arguably their best passing performance of the season against Navy.
Sure.
So like there's but some of that was some wrinkles. We broke it down. There were some wrinkles in that game that we really liked. Against Pitt, we saw a lot of the same things. The cross out backside. We saw some slot fades. We saw some verticals. We didn't really see a lot of wrinkles that I felt like went at Pitt. Now, the danger of adding a bunch of wrinkles is you have a new quarterback. You want him to get comfortable with your base stuff first. So, I mean, I'm not even upset that Mike Denbrock is doing that. It's you have to understand when you have 2 new starting offensive linemen late in the year, you have a redshirt freshman quarterback. You can't just reinvent your passing game every week. You have to allow your young quarterback to get some foundation that he's comfortable with. I think we've seen enough from him in the last few weeks with the mistakes and the positives that I think he's kind of got the base stuff kind of down. Now it's like, okay, let's add some more to it. What does that look like? That's for them to decide. I would like to see more mesh stuff. I don't think they're doing enough with Will Pauling and Jordan Faison to get them on the run. It's still too stationary with the routes that they're running. I want to see some mesh. I want to see some crossers. I want to see some more double moves with Jordan Faison catching quick game underneath. There's some things that we've seen opponents do to Notre Dame, like some of the stuff that they did with Malachi Toney. And I would love to see Notre Dame do some of that with Jordan Faison. Doing some things where you get Jordan Faison to catch the ball on the run. Everything Jordan Faison does right now is stationary. It's hitches, stops, comebacks. And I like those things because he can catch and square you up and go make plays. But let's do some things in the offense that allows Jordan to get running across the field, overs, crossers, unders, reverse pivots, slants. I mean, run a slot fade, but if a team's going to run a slot fade where they're going to try to play the corner out, then maybe have Jordan come out and then come underneath and catch the ball on the run. Just some different wrinkles like that put teams in a bind. These are great games to maybe add a couple things that, you kind of work on. Not that it's a practice game, but they're things that you need. And this is a game where there's lower risk.
Yeah.
You can run those things.
But here's why this is so important. This is why I love this key, Brian, is because against Syracuse and against Stanford, but we'll talk about Syracuse right now, they can get away with doing the same stuff that they ran the last couple of weeks. That's what's important, why we have to see it in this game. Because, look, fact of the matter is you can run the same stuff that you ran against A&M and Purdue and Boise and Arkansas and USC and Navy and Boston College and Pitt that you do against Stanford and arguably win by a wider margin than you did in most of those games. But why it's important is putting yourself in a position to have that success come the postseason when that comes around. I love that key to victory, man. I'm spot on. If they're able to do those things, ideally, they're able to reach what their over-under point total is on FanDuel. Right now, it's set at 43.5. So here's hoping. But arguably the biggest thing, all of this encompassing, starting fast, consistency in the run game, enhancing your pass game. Notre Dame is going to have to find a way to also consistently finish drives. Mm-hmm. Finishing is going to be the final key for this one, and it's going to be huge. Look, Notre Dame put up 28 points on offense. Despite scoring 37 as a team, they put up 28 points on offense against Pitt, and that wasn't because of their inability to move the football, like it was in previous games as well. In between the 20s, Notre Dame is extremely effective. There's a reason why they rank inside of the top 25 in college football in total yards per game, and they're top 10 in the country in yards per play, aren't they? And so finishing drives is going to have to be crucial for them. And it's something that they're going to have to continue working on and do consistently. That's key number 4.
Here's the rub. You have to be careful that you don't finish here and it's just because you're just better than Syracuse. There needs to be some level of, okay, we've adjusted, we've made some corrections, we've altered our plan, and now we just have to finish better. I mean, now we just have to grow it, as opposed to, yeah, we were doing the same stuff that hasn't worked against good teams, but it looked better against Syracuse, and so now we feel like we've found answers. That's not really it. Now, if you're doing the same things you've been doing, but you're executing better, quarterback makes a better read, guards block better, whatever. Okay, sure, I can kind of live with that, but that's not really always been the case. You've allowed yourself to get out leveraged at times. You've allowed yourself to get outnumbered at times and don't have answers for it. So what are some of those answers? Like, I don't want to see you throw a fade to Malachi Fields at the 5-yard line against Syracuse and Boise State, but you're not willing to do it against USC and Pitt and, some better teams on the schedule. Malachi's got to do a better job running that route. His short area fade against Pitt on Saturday was not good. His further back go route for a touchdown was much better. He's got to do a better job of winning off the line, and that's something that the receivers as a whole, their route technique near the goal line has not been good. They run fades like they run go routes. Well, go route is a completely different structure because a go route allows you to run by the guys, close them off, and things like that. A fade is you have to use your release to gain leverage over the defensive back, but then also to allow yourself more room away from the sideline. And they don't do that. That's something they need to get better at. That's coaching. Coach Brown needs to do a better job there. I wonder if part of that is because he was a smaller receiver, that's not something that's necessarily been in his repertoire, but it's something that absolutely has to be developed and enhanced. And how Jordan Faison's going to win off the line is going to be different than Malachi Fields is going to win off the line. But you have to be better at both of it and add some of that to it. But this is a game to say, okay, but I still don't mind seeing it to Malachi or Eli Raridan if you think it's something that's going to be a bigger part of what you do down the road. So it part of it just gets better at what you are doing, but then also be willing to adjust and adapt and alter some things to make yourself better, because you have to be able to go out in games, Trevor, and finish. And this is the thing that's frustrating about this team. There's so many fans that are just like constantly complaining. We had a question yesterday about the offense. Do we have to just cope with how the offense is? Do you have to cope with it being a top 10 offense? Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry that this top 10 offense is doing that to you, that you have to cope and just accept the fact they're a bottom of the top 10 offense. And I get frustrated with those responses and those overreactions, while at the same time understanding what's at the heart of them. So my whole thing is, I can understand your frustration, but I think you're taking your conclusion to too far of a ridiculous extreme. Acting like this isn't a really good offense is an emotional overreaction to your frustration for the fact that they're not better in the red zone. I'm frustrated that they're not better in the red zone. They need to be better in the red zone. You know who else is frustrated they're not better in the red zone? Mike Denbrock, CJ Carr, Jeremiah Love. I promise you, they have to get better there. But that means they go from being a 6-10 offense to a 1-2 offense. Like, do you guys understand that? Like, that's where they are. It's not that they're a top 25 offense and they need to finish better to become a top 15 offense or top 10 offense. They're already a top 10 offense. They have a shot to be the best offense in the country. I'm not saying they will be. They have a shot to be. And if they're going to do that, enhancing the pass game a little bit schematically and getting better in the scoring zone is huge for that. And, you see it over and over again. Boise State, you turn it over on downs inside the 5. I think they also, or was that NC State? They threw a pick against NC State inside the 15-yard line. Or was that Boise? They threw the pick against
They
NC
did
State,
it against
correct?
They did it against NC
down?
State against Boise State. Their first drive of the game was a turnover on downs on 4th.
Right, inside the 10. You got it down to the 1. You had the stupid false start in the Wildcat, moved you back in it. I'm not scoring. Also against NC State, you fumbled the ball inside the 5-yard line. That's 2 scores right there where all of a sudden it's 50-something to 49-7, 50-something to 7, and we're having a different conversation about how Miami's 41-7 win over them. So much more impressive. Yeah. You look at the NC State. The USC game. You had a 10-point win over a ranked team. Imagine if that game would have gone how it should have gone, meaning you don't throw an interception inside the 5-yard line, and at the very least you settle for a field goal there. And they ended up missing 2 field goals or another field goal that game. So at the very least, if you could just make a field goal, it's a 40-24 game. Looks a little better. So all those things factor into it, where it's not about what can they do to get good on offense. It's they're already good. What can they do to be elite on offense? And that's where finishing comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this isn't an offensive key to victory. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. I just wanted to echo it. Get Eric Schmidt some some much needed practice reps, given the situation. You laid it out yesterday. If it's a 0-0 ball game and it's, 4th and 3 from the 29-yard line, don't trot them out for a field goal. Go for it. I get that. But fixing a lot of the struggles in the kicking game, I think, kind of sets off a positive chain reaction for Notre Dame, because then they're not in a spot where they have to go for it on 4th and 3 and on the goal line and risk that getting worse. Because a lot of this is coming from the notion that, short yardage offense has to get better. Yes, it does. Red zone offense has to get better. Yes, it does. They also shouldn't be in a scenario that they have to go for it on 4th down every single time they cross the 40-yard line. Both things can be true. So fixing the kicking game would also go a long way in fixing the red zone offense.
Here's the other thing too, Trevor. It's sort of a not even a counter, because it's not a counter, because what you're saying is correct. It'd be nice to have the option of kicking a field goal when we needed to. When you look at it as an offense, where 4th and goal from the 5 might be a little too far away to otherwise try it, but hey, we'll give it a whirl. Now on Saturday it worked out. They ended up scoring a touchdown, but there's other games they haven't scored on those 4th down calls. But it'd be nice to also go for it on 4th down a lot more, not because you don't trust your kicking game, but because that's how confident you are in your red zone and scoring zone offensive scoring. So they're going for it more because they don't trust the field goal game, but they're not good enough at it to have that sort of that sort of confidence in it. Imagine where they are, where, hey, I'm going to go for it because I know that we have a great shot at getting it here. And that's more so where you want that to come from. So it's not even the number of times they've gone for it that bothers me. It's, to your point, I think you're correct. They're not doing it because they are that confident in their ability to score in those situations, because they haven't earned that right to be that confident. It comes down to they don't have any confidence whatsoever in their kicking game. Yeah. I want them to get to the point where they find some answers in the red zone and in the scoring zone where it's like, no, we're going for it here because we're there. Or here's a crazy thought. You don't get the 4th down. You don't get the 4th and goal because you executed better on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Those are all parts of it.
Folks, that is going to do it for part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. But we're going to finish up today's show by talking about the keys to victory for the Notre Dame defense. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel as well as the CFB Nation channel. Bill Bender and Bill Trocchi are going to go live tomorrow morning, preview this upcoming week's of games. And then tomorrow night, Vince and I are going live at 8 p.m. Eastern time for this week's edition of the Spread Option. So not going to want to miss either of those shows. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in the final part of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we are talking about Notre Dame's defense and their keys to victory in their senior day matchup over the Syracuse Orange. Now, a little bit of a different tonality talking about this Notre Dame defense because they've been playing absolutely lights out over the last couple of weeks. In their last 7 games, they're giving up 12.3 points per game, 291 total yards of offense over the last 7 games, 196 passing yards, 95 rushing yards, and that includes a 200 rushing yard performance against Navy. So this defense has been humming on all cylinders. They're facing an offense that has been struggling, especially ever since the injury to Steve Angeli. So a lot of our keys to victory today, folks, are going to be geared towards that. It's, okay, we look at this matchup on paper, dominating defense over the last month and a half, going up against a really struggling offense. What do we have to see from this unit, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into specifics 1, 2, 3, and 4, but at the end of the day, Trevor, a lot of this just comes down to, again, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, like on offense, it's a lot of, hey, you're close, but improve here, 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 and here. You're showing flashes, but need to see more consistency here, 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 and here. When you look at the defense, Trevor, it really has been about, you've been pretty dominant, pretty consistently. And outside of, I'll just even say just 3 blown coverages against USC. The last 6 weeks, you've been as good as any defense in college football. And even in that game against USC, I mean, you held USC to one of their lowest outputs of the season. I mean, I think it was their lowest scoring output of the season. It was one of their lower, I think it was their lowest offensive output at the time. It's still their second lowest yards per play output of the season, and that was with all those blown coverages in there. mean, Notre Dame on defense has been absolutely lights out for a while now. I mean, you held Boise to 315 yards, 4.4 yards per play. NC State went for 233, 3.95 yards per play. We talked about USC. Their last three opponents, BC, Navy, and Pitt, went for 281, 228, 219. The Navy statistic is interesting because Notre Dame held them to 228 yards of total offense. Navy on the season is averaging 308.2 rushing yards. And you held them to 228 total yards. They're also averaging 140 passing yards. That is one of the better offenses in college football, no matter how much people want to think about it. And then there's this notion that, well, you know, they're beating up on bad teams. And my answer is just because a team isn't good doesn't mean an offense isn't good. And when you look at what Notre Dame has done in recent weeks, just looking at it, first of all, from a raw scoring standpoint in this stretch, they have held the number 10 offense and scoring offense in the country to 24 points, which is 13 below their season scoring average. They held the number, let's see here. So you've got Arkansas, the number 25 scoring offense in the country, a team that averages 34 points a game, held them to 13. You held Navy, the number 33 scoring offense in the country, at 32.9 points per game to 20 points below their scoring average. You held Pitt, who's 37.2 points per game. You held them to 15, 6 of which came on the final play of the game. Another 7 came from their defense, and 3 of their points came on a field goal drive that started at 12. And she absolutely dominated that. So you're not playing a bunch of bad offenses. Like we made the case last year that part of Notre Dame's off defensive statistics, they were very good, but they also played not very many good offenses. We made that case last year. This year, that's not the case, and we said that before the season. It's been true. Now, that doesn't justify how bad it was at the beginning, but you have to at some point in time say they've been consistent enough to where we can say they are what we want the offense to be, which is this is who you are. Week after week, this is who you are. Couple bad plays here and there you got to clean up against Navy. Couple bad plays here and there you got to clean up against USC. But overall, you've been a dominant football team for week after week after week after week.
Oh, yeah.
And now it's about just keeping that going.
100%. Four of their wins in their 8-game win streak came against top 30 offenses in the FEI. USC's 4th, Arkansas's 13th, Navy's 28th, and NC State's 29th. And not only did they handle those teams, they held them well below their output. It's not like USC came into the game averaging, which I think they did, 552 total yards of offense, and then Notre Dame held them to 549. And we're like, they held them to under their average. Like, they dominated in those matchups, bro.
They scored 40 points a game. We held them to 39. Like, you know what it reminds me of? There's this one of these things about Larry Bird where I guess Larry Bird told a guy he was going to get 40 on him. He goes, he didn't get 40 on me. I mean, he's like, he got 39. You know, it's like okay. Sure. It's not that. That's not what we're talking about here.
No.
Yeah.
No. They've been dominant. But all of that is kind of this recipe for something that could potentially be a little weird to watch go down on Saturday afternoon, because at the end of the day, they're going up against an offense that currently ranks 106 in the country in points per game, 104th in yards per play, 113th in rush yards, 52nd in pass yards, but efficiency numbers, 91st in yards per attempt, 57th in touchdowns, 127th in interceptions, and 104th in rating. So, Brian, all of that encompassing leads us to point number 1 in our keys to victory for the defense, and it's to stay focused and be disciplined against this team.
This game, it's very similar to BC, and at times they didn't do great in this area against BC. They dominated BC, but they allowed BC to get too much. You know, we talk about holding teams below their totals. Well, BC scoring 24.6 points per game this year, and Notre Dame held them to 10. That's below their average. BC this season, they're not good, but they still held them well below. BC this season is averaging 378 yards of offense. Notre Dame held them to 281. But it should have been even better. And it would have been better if there was more focus in certain areas. Some of the penalties we talked about, I don't know what you're supposed to tell Josh Burnham. He didn't grab the guy's face mask. I don't know what you're going to tell him. Some of the other penalties were like, dude, that's on you. Like the Jalen Seed personal foul. Like, what are you doing there? You know, and that allowed BC to continue a drive. And so, like, avoid those type of plays. Don't play hero ball. Tay Johnson, don't go looking for a pick Don Schuler, Christian Gray, Leonard Moore. Don't go looking for a pick in a situation where you wouldn't otherwise do so because you're trying to get that pick six. If that comes to you within the framework of the defense, great, just like we saw last week. Tay had one, and if Drake Bowen doesn't bat down a pass, and Drake did what he's supposed to do, he doesn't know what's coming behind him. But if he doesn't bat down a pass, Tay's got 2 pick sixes last week. He almost had one against BC the week before. Remember the dropped interception he had early in the game? And if he could have just kept his knee off the ground, he would. I mean, it's like, but those things all came within the framework of the defense. But when you start having those plays and you're playing a bad team, you can start to kind of look for those things, which means you bite on a play that then allows Syracuse to hit a pump and on you, and then they beat you on a double move. Or you don't time it up well, you miss the ball, the guy catches it, and then turns and runs for 40 yards. Those are the plays I don't want to see, because you miss a sack because you're going for the big hit instead of the proper technique.
Or the same thing with the same thing with the receivers as well. Like we said yesterday, they have some talent at receiver. Like if Don Schuler or Tay Johnson are looking to headhunt and they try to lay the wood down on Jonte Cook, that's one spin move and he could take it. Like, it's remaining discipline is going to be absolutely huge. No hero ball. Like, you make the hero plays by not trying to play hero ball. Like, Tay Johnson had a pick 6 against Pitt, which busted the game wide open by just doing his job. Mm-hmm. That was it. I agree with you completely. Mm-hmm. And Brian, if they're able to stay
because he's super talented, like you have range that other people don't have.
Yes.
Trust yourself, but then trust the coaches and the system to put you in place to make a play. That's really where we're coming from, Trevor, is if you just keep doing what you're doing and playing within the structure of the defense, you will make plays. Now, this also assumes, and again, we should probably kind of say this every week, but I kind of feel like Chris Ash has done enough for us to not feel like we have to preface everything assuming the game plan is good, assuming the game plan remains aggressive. That's part of it. Hopefully that's the case. We're not including that in the breakdowns this week, but I want to say that now is as long as the coaches do what they're supposed to do, then play within the structure, then the result will be you get picks. You get turnovers, you get sacks, you get run stops and things like that. It's just don't go outside of what has made you where you are to get there. Twofold. Number one, that allows Syracuse to make some plays they otherwise wouldn't make. You're not going to lose that way, but they're going to be on the field more. And then two, you don't want to develop bad habits because you're playing 2 bad football teams the next 2 weeks. And that's a very important. I've seen that, Trevor. I mean, look, especially when you coach at like the 1AA and Division III level, like I coached at, there tends to be a wider variance from the best teams and the worst teams in each league. Like teams like Kentucky and in Purdue, they're bad. They're the worst teams in the league, but like they can at least like belong on a field where like they're not as good as Ohio State, but like they've got some guys. When you coach at the lower levels, there's some times where you're like, they don't have a kid on that roster that would literally be in our 2 deep. And it's bad. And you see it. You see them developing bad habits because they're trying. They don't respect that opponent. They don't care about that opponent. And so we'd have to really be on our players like, dude, you wouldn't try to do that stuff if you were, playing somebody else. Don't try to bounce that run because you can outrun this slow defense. Do what we taught you to do. And that's really what you're trying to avoid. Because the players, they watch film. They know that the quarterback, whoever they're going to face, is terrible. They know the offensive line they're going against is terrible. They know the running game that they're going against is no threat at all. So you have to make sure that you have them alert and really during the week of practice, hammer them on doing it the way we're telling you to do it.
And it's going to go a long way to the conversation we had yesterday about the maturity of this football team, because they were looking for that big play against Boston College. Have they learned their lesson from that outing? And are they going to really put it together in this one? Now, if they do, that leads us into key number 2, which I think is really important in this matchup as well. And that's putting Syracuse away early. Look, no way around it. They absolutely have the ability to. Right now on FanDuel, Notre Dame they're favored by 21 points in the first half. Like, they're expected to take at least a 21-point lead into halftime. And if they're able to do some of these things, then I think that's absolutely going to be a viable option. Some of this also feeds into this is a common opponent with Miami. Miami took a 14-0 lead into halftime. What does Notre Dame do in this regard? And then, of course, also, like, not as important to the key to victory, but that does also give some of your inexperienced players some time. Get Jadon Blair in the game. It is senior day. Get the seniors in. Like, put this one away early and hang your hat on a really good quality, really good margin of victory win in your final regular season game in Notre Dame Stadium.
You want to make a statement. And the best way to make a statement is it's not just the final score. Because as we've seen, this committee doesn't just look at box scores. As much as the media doesn't want to admit it, they don't just look at box scores. They watch games. They're especially watching games now, late in the season. It's not that Notre Dame beat Pitt by 22 that was necessarily the impressive thing. It's that game was just very clearly, very early on, you have no chance in this football game. Like, none. I don't care. The final score of the Arkansas game was 56-13. Anyone that watched that game knew that Notre Dame called off the dogs in a big, big way in that game. It was 42-13 at halftime. You want to make sure that you're going into this game at halftime where it's very obvious to everyone that, like, this team is absolutely destroying Syracuse. You don't want to let Syracuse get any confidence in going into this game. And then in the second half, it'd be very awesome if you could not only get some of your seniors some work, because actually that's not a long list of guys for Notre Dame. I mean, I want to get Kobe Onyuke some action. He's going to be in senior day, I believe, on Saturday. He's a walk-on you have a lot of respect for. Charles Dew, some of those guys I think are seniors. But I also want to get some young guys some playing time. I want to get Jadon Blair on the field. I want to get some snaps for Dallas Golden and Cree Thomas and Mark Zachary. I want to get Mad Faramo some snaps. I want to get Bodie Cahoon some snaps. I want to get Chris Burgess some snaps. Some of those young guys who are now at the point where they can safely play the last two games and not have to worry about eligibility. I want to see those guys get on the field and get some snaps, because you never know. Some of those guys might impress you enough to where he's like, hey, this guy's going to be in our rotation in the playoffs, because playoffs don't count towards eligibility. So I'd like to see those things from the defense as well. And the only way you do that is to just not toy with this team. Just put them away early. Let them know right now, you guys, you don't have a chance. So we're just going to annihilate you. And 1 and 2 kind of tie together in that regard.
Well, and if they are going to put this one away early, we get into the conversation of how they're going to do that, Brian. And that leads us into our third key to victory, and that's shutting down the run game. And that's something that Notre Dame has done an exceptional job of so far this season, really, over the course of the year. Especially, like I said, in their last 7 games, they're holding teams to an average of 95 rush yards a game, and that's factoring in the 200-yard rushing performance Navy had. This has been a dominant run defense.
Which was over 100 yards below their season average.
Correct.
Correct.
So even in the game, that big picture, you look at numbers, they gave up 200 rushing yards on the ground. It was still significantly below what they average on the ground. And then they're going up against the Syracuse rushing offense that we said, yes, passing offense took a hit. Points per game took a hit when Steve Angeli went down. Their rushing offense is just what it was all year. Right now, they're averaging 3.4 yards a carry. They have 10 rushing touchdowns on the season. They only have 8 runs of 20 yards or longer. Most meaningful categories, they're ranking outside of the top 100 in rushing. But Notre Dame has to now cement that and make sure that, they don't find some big plays in this one. They have to really be, and again, it goes back to point 1 and point 2. Shutting down the run game is going to be huge in this one.
Yeah, if you took Navy's data out of the conversation and just looked at how Notre Dame has performed against the traditional offenses, they're giving up 87.4 rushing yards per game, which would rank them 7th in college football. Like, that's impressive. And look, I've had a lot of frustrations this season with Chris Ash. The improved run defense came early, even before the overall change happened. The run defense was clearly better, really, from second half of Miami on. It was obvious they were just going to be a better run defense. And as they started letting the linebackers be more aggressive, they got even better and better and better stopping the run. I mean, they've been an absolutely dominant rushing team for a while. You gave up 66 to Purdue, 158 to Arkansas. 54 of that was on a blown, quarterback keep play. held Boise to 100. NC State, USC, Boston College went for 51, 68, and 12. They gave up the 206 to Navy. As we pointed out, Navy right now in the season leads all of college football in rushing offense at 308.2 yards per game. And they're at 6.4 yards per carry. They were at 206 and 4.6 against Notre Dame. And then obviously Pitt, they held to 70 yards on 25 carries. And a good chunk of that came on scrambles. So you need to continue being that. And this goes back to the developing good habits. But then the other part of it is they're starting is he a true freshman? The kid's a true freshman, right? Their quarterback, the walk-on?
Yes.
So you're starting a true freshman quarterback who is not starting because he's really good like Mason Heinschel was. He's starting because everybody else has been so dreadfully bad and is injured. And he's 7 of 21 on the season with a touchdown. He's thrown for 78 yards, 3.7 yards per attempt. You want this game to be about him. You do. Look, Syracuse has been bad running the football. They're going to try to come out and run the football in this game. I'm confident in that. We're going to see some 12. This is my prediction. We're going to see some 12 personnel. We're going to see some motions. We're going to see them do things to try to get the screen game going, get the bootleg and play action game going to protect the quarterback, and they are going to try to run the football. I'm confident of that. Now, are they going to be any good at it? That's on you, Notre Dame. I mean, that's gonna be determined by where your focus is in this football game. But if Notre Dame can do what they should do, Trev, and that is, go out there and kind of do what you've been doing, I don't think that Syracuse is going to have any success with it. I mean, Syracuse against Miami in their last game out ran the ball 43 times. That's the most they've run it since the first game of the season. And honestly, the 44 attempts against Tennessee, a lot of those were sacks and Steve Angeli scrambling. They ran the ball 43 times for 161 yards. They were trying to shorten the game. They were trying to limit possessions and keep Miami's offense off the field, and it worked for a while. That's why Miami only had 7 points on offense in the first half, because it was 14-0 at halftime, but they had a pick six like in the last minute of the half to go up 14-0. They're going to try to shorten the game. You got to just dominate them the way that you did Boston College and Pitt, and get them into a lot of second and longs and third and longs. We talked about this last week, how Pitt wasn't very good on third down. Pitt went, what was it, Trev? We said 0 of 10. What was Pitt on 0 of 13 on third down? There was only one third down opportunity that was less than 3rd and 6. And it was a goal to go situation. It wasn't a goal to go situation. It was a inside the 10-yard line play. We're 3rd and 4. And you're trying to get into a goal to go situation. Like, not one of their other 13 of their other 12 third down attempts was less than 6, and most of them weren't 6. Why is that? Because Pitt kept trying to run the ball, and they had like one little nice dart play here, one little nice outside zone here where Desmond Reed bounced it. But the rest of them were 2, 1, 0, -1, -2. Needs to be the same case in this game. You've got to come out and just completely shut down their run game and don't allow them to shorten the clock. Put them in a lot of third longs. If you get in some third longs, this game could get real ugly real fast, because this quarterback will not be able to handle that. And I feel bad for the kid. If Notre Dame does what they do, I feel bad for the kid, because they don't have the team to protect a young quarterback. They don't. And you've got to make sure that continues in this game. Don't be undisciplined. Don't give up those silly 20-yard run because you were trying to hit a home run. So you over-pursued this way, thinking I'm going to get the big hit, and the kid cuts back on you behind the zone where you should have been, where you should have fit, and he runs for 25 yards. I don't want to see that mess. No. First team or second team in this game.
Brian, everything that you said kind of leads us into our final point of the keys to victory, and that is to light up the quarterback. Not in a pass the whistle way, not in a take cheap shots way, but it's you got to get after him in this one, because if you do, this one will be over relatively early. Notre Dame is the 3rd-ranked team in the country in interceptions. I see that number going up, especially because look, I agree with you 100%. They're absolutely going to come out and try to run the ball. They're not going to go an entire game without throwing the football. Like, they will ask this kid to throw, and when they do, Notre Dame has to be ready to pin their ears back, pressure him, make him even more uncomfortable than what he's already going to be. And if so, that's going to go a long way in putting this one away early.
Yeah, we talk about this, Trev. A lot of our keys to victory are building blocks on each other. And this is the one. You shut down the run game to put the game on his shoulders. And when the game gets on his shoulders, you heat him up. This is a great opportunity for Boubacar Traore to kind of get hot. Boubacar had a good game against Pitt. I thought he had some good pressures. He was good against BC, but this is a game I'm really waiting on him to kind of really take off, really have that dominant game. I feel like Boubacar all season has been good and consistent, getting after the quarterback. You look at him, he's got 30 pressures on the season and he's only played in 9 games. Last year, Notre Dame's leader in pressures was 34 with Riley Mills, and he played in 13 games. You know what I mean? So, Boubacar's been good. You look at Isaiah Foskey's last season at Notre Dame. He had 32 pressures that season in 13 games. Or that was his, not his last, no, 22 was his last season. That was the year he had the breakout year. And then his last season, he had 33 pressures on the season in 12 games. Boubacar in 9 games is at 30 pressures. He's got 13 hits plus sacks in a quarterback, which obviously leads the defense. If you look at last year, Trev, let me find it here. You had 13. Riley Mills led the team with 13 sacks plus hits on the quarterback and earned second-team All-American honors, and that he did that in 13 games. Boubacar's done that in 9. So I don't want to act like Boubacar hasn't been playing well. The scary thing is that there's another level for Boubacar. That's what I'm getting at. And this is the kind of game where you could see something like that. I want to see Josh Burnham continue to feast. I want to see the interior guys. I want to see Jared Dawson, kind of get his pass rushing groove back a little bit. And that's part of it. So the pass rush is part of it. The other part of it is kind of what you did last week. Chris Ash used one of his most, I don't say provocative, but just just really complex blitz structures that he's used all year. They were doing things last week that I bet you $100, Trevor. I bet you a Polito's Pizza next time you're in town, that if they were playing a third-year starter at quarterback, they would not have done half of the stuff they did. And that's not a criticism. That's, hey, we know who we're playing. We're going to do some things that a veteran might recognize, but this young kid won't, and we can bait him into some mistakes. That's not bad coaching. That's actually good coaching. Because then if you are playing a veteran, you aren't going to take some of those chances because he's going to be able to set the protection and find the soft spot, and he's going to beat you with it, right? So that's what I mean by that. And you also knew the offensive line was going to struggle. So I want to see more of that this game because this kid's not even as good as last week. The worst thing that could happen in this game is Notre Dame's playing a bad opponent, and they just kind of sit back and say, we're just better than you. We're going to keep everything in front of us and go at it like they did early in the year. I do not want to see that mess. I want to see Chris Ash say, we're going after this team. Their line's not very good. Their run back game's not very good. Their quarterback's not very good. We're going to heat them up. Sometimes that's a 4-man pass rush. You bring a bunch and then you zone fire and you drop 3 and the kid throws the ball right into, Boubacar's chest or something like that, or throws it right into Burnham's chest or right into Drake Bowen or Jaden Osby or Kingston's chest, right? Because he thought he was going to get something and you confused him. It's all part of it. But it's all meant to physically and mentally get on him. Get him off of his game, have him thrown off of his back foot. That's when you're going to get a bunch of turnovers and really put this game away. But Syracuse will try to run the clock. They will try. They tried to do that early against Georgia Tech. They tried to run the ball early and obviously had some turnovers and some mistakes that really cost them, but they tried early in that game to come out and run the football and kept it close for a while, and then Georgia Tech kind of put them away early. You can't allow that to happen. You've got to put this team away right now. And that's how we do it. Be disciplined, be focused, right? Shut down the run game, light the quarterback up. And the other part of lighting the quarterback up is the one thing that Syracuse does have is they do have good wide receivers. If this was a 7-on-7 game, our attitude of the matchup would have looked way different. Because we'd be like, look, Notre Dame's a better team, but they got some guys now. Like they got, Jonte Cook's a good football player. Daryl Gill's a good football player. The tight end Dan Villari is a good football player. Like they have legit weapons in the pass game.
Well, yeah.
And if you just let that quarterback get comfortable in the game. He has some weapons that can hurt you. You can't let him do that. And that's our point. Don't let the one good thing they have right now on their football team be a factor in this game. You do that by shut down the run game, being disciplined, and heat the quarterback up. Don't give them time to get the ball down the field. Make them throw a bunch of quick game to guys driving downhill and blowing guys up. That's totally fine with that. But don't play off coverage, a lot of cover 4, a lot of cover 3, where he's hitting hitch routes and quick out cuts and slants, and you're just giving them the inside leverage because you don't want to give up a big play. Heat them up. Go after them and dominate like you should.
And if you do that, Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame are going to be well on their way to their 4th straight win under Marcus Freeman on senior day, and all of them have been non-competitive up to this point. I'm willing to bet that you and I are both going to predict this to be somewhat of a non-competitive game tomorrow as well. But, folks, that is going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Here in a little bit under an hour and a half, the guys are going live on IB Nation Sports Beat. Got their midweek mailbag, and they're also going to be talking a little bit more about Notre Dame's playoff ranking. Tomorrow, Brian and I will be back at 1 p.m. We're going to be talking through some of
may have a special guest tomorrow, maybe. We'll see.
May have a special guest. All the more reason to tune in tomorrow at 1 p.m. We're also going to be going over some other games from this weekend as well, Notre Dame playoff rooting guide, all the fun stuff that we always do on Thursdays. On your way out of here, folks, please be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you know whenever we go live. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, folks, until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.